Memory arrives before experience. You remember the hallway, the sound of a door creaking open, the smell of rain on concrete, a voice saying your name, not just the word, but the weight behind it. You remember it, don't you? Except one day you realize you can't say when it happened, or if it happened at all, and yet the feeling is there. Deep, familiar, so sharp it cuts through years like glass, so real it brings tears. But when you look for the memory's origin, it slips, it unravels. You chase it, and it leads you to echoes, stories told about you, photos you've seen, dreams you mistook for diaries. And suddenly, you're left with a terrifying question. What if some of your most vivid memories were planted, not maliciously, not with intent, but by the quiet, unrelenting hand of suggestion, by family stories, by childhood anecdotes repeated so often you began to own them, by a photograph you saw so many times that your mind filled in the frame around it, by the storyteller who named your past before you could form it for yourself. This is the haunting phenomenon. Memory arrives before experience. You remember being a child on a swing, laughing, but it's a memory told to you, not by you. You remember crying at school, but only because a parent reminded you, and somewhere along the way, the line blurred. Memory fused with narrative. Experience was overwritten by story, and the story began to feel truer than anything your senses ever captured. Your brain, after all, is not a camera. It's a prediction machine. It takes fragments of sound, light, emotion, and stitches them into meaning. But meaning needs structure, so the mind builds story. And when story is missing, it accepts someone else's, a sibling's version, a parent's tone, a therapist's theory. Your mind doesn't fight it. It wants to belong, and belonging means alignment, even if that means rewriting what never was. So now you're standing in front of your life, wondering, which parts did I live, and which parts did I inherit? You can describe your traumas, but can't recall the day they began. You know who hurt you, but not whether they meant to. You carry anger, but it feels too old to be yours. And in the silence between memory and proof, doubt creeps in. Maybe that's why you forget the moments that actually shaped you. The quiet griefs, the ordinary betrayals, the casual dismissals from people you loved. Those moments didn't come with stories. No one narrated them. So they slid beneath your awareness, shaping the curve of your spine, the weight of your breath, the way you flinch when someone says, relax. They became muscle, not memory. So what did come first, your story or your storyteller? Were you a person before you were told who to be? Were you sad before someone named you sensitive? Were you broken before someone told you what normal looked like? Or was it all pre-scripted? Not maliciously, no, but in the way every child absorbs their role. The helper, the rebel, the quiet one, the anxious one. You played the part, you memorized the lines, and you thought it was you. But what if the real you, the felt you, never got the script? What if the deepest moments of your life left no trace in language, just a silence, a mood, a behavior you can't explain, an ache with no clear origin? That's the paradox. The most transformative experiences are often the ones you don't remember, because your brain, overwhelmed, chose not to record them in words. So now you're here, remembering what you didn't live, and forgetting what changed you, trying to navigate life with a map someone else drew. But here's where the power returns. You can rewrite it. You can look at each memory and ask, did I feel this, or was I told to feel it? You can listen to your reactions, those instinctive flinches and frozen moments, and realize these are the fingerprints of the forgotten. Not brokenness, but buried truth. You don't need to remember everything to understand yourself. You only need to ask, what still hurts? What still scares me? What doesn't make sense? Until I stopped trusting the story I was given. Because beneath all that noise, there's something quiet, raw, pre-verbal. The part of you that lived the moment before the memory. The child who felt the fracture before anyone explained it. The version of you who didn't need language to know. And maybe that's where real healing begins. Not by remembering, but by listening to the parts of you that were never told the truth. You don't need their story anymore. You are allowed to unremember. You are allowed to forget the script. You are allowed to write a new beginning. One that starts not with memory, but with presence. You are already remembered. You think you're making choices, that your life is unfolding moment by moment, fresh, unwritten, real. But sometimes, in the silence between thoughts, there's a strange tension, a familiarity you can't explain. You turn down a street you've never walked and feel like you've been there before. You meet someone for the first time, and their face echoes in your bones. You speak a sentence and feel, deep in your chest, that you've said it before, somewhere, somehow. This is more than déjà vu. It's a fracture in the illusion, a whisper behind the curtain of time. And it says this: you are already remembered. Not in a poetic sense, not metaphorically, but literally. Something, some force, some architecture far beyond what we understand, has already seen you, already mapped your movements, already carved your name into the hidden grain of reality. You're not just living, you're fulfilling a memory you never created, and that changes everything. Because if this is true, your entire concept of freedom shifts. The dreams you chase, the mistakes you make, the relationships you build, they feel like they arise from choice. But what if they're echoes? Not from the past, but from a memory already stored somewhere else. What if your instincts aren't instincts, but recognitions? What if the moments that feel most powerful, most painful, most pivotal are not where life begins, but where it aligns? You don't remember creating this memory, but it remembers you, and it calls to you, not with words, but with emotional gravity, that strange draw towards certain people, that magnetic pull towards certain ideas, that haunting repetition of patterns, of cycles, of tragedies that feel too precise to be random. You may think you're lost, wandering, improvising your way through the fog, but what if the fog is the path? What if the forgetting is part of the remembering? Some ancient traditions speak of this, that before birth, your soul chooses a path, but forgets it upon arrival, that you live to rediscover what you already knew, and what you call fate is just memory surfacing. But there's another possibility, darker, stranger, harder to hold. What if you didn't make the memory? What if this life you're living, these urges, these sufferings, this identity, is someone else's recollection, not your past, but their memory of you, a record being replayed? In which case, what are you? An echo? A reenactment? A soul inside a file? This would explain the eerie precision of certain coincidences, the dreams that feel more real than waking life, the sense that time bends around key moments, the invisible rhythm beneath your most irrational decisions. It would explain why, even when you try to reinvent yourself, strip it all down, start from scratch, something tugs you back toward the same themes, the same archetypes, the same people, wearing new masks. You aren't free from the story. You are the story, and it is being recalled. So then the question becomes, who's remembering you? A future version of yourself? A consciousness beyond time? A collective dream we're all trapped inside? Or something even stranger? An ancient intelligence that stores souls like data, replaying lives as memory loops, not to teach or punish, but simply to preserve. And if that's true, then death isn't an ending. It's an archiving. You return to the shelf. But here's the twist. Maybe your suffering matters more than you think. Maybe pain leaves the deepest grooves in memory. Maybe the things you struggle with, the loneliness, the heartbreak, the silence, are the very data points that make you memorable. Maybe healing isn't about breaking the loop. Maybe it's about completing the memory, fulfilling what was already known, so it no longer needs to be remembered. And maybe, just maybe, you are the last fragment, the one that hasn't yet aligned. You, sitting here, wondering why things feel both familiar and wrong. Why life feels both chosen and forced. Why your heart aches for something you can't name. You ache because your name has already been whispered into the future. You ache because your existence is being retrieved, not created. And that ache, that strange pulse behind your thoughts, that is the moment the memory starts to awaken. And in that moment, you are not lost. You are located. The present isn't happening. You reach for a cup of coffee. The warmth touches your fingertips. You feel it, smell it, sip it. But here's what your brain doesn't tell you. By the time you experience that moment, it's already over. Because your perception, the feeling of now, is a reconstruction, a delay, a hallucination stitched together from fragments of sensory data, processed with just enough lag to keep you functional but never truly present. You live your entire life a fraction of a second behind reality. And once you understand that, the question unravels everything. Does the present even exist? This is the paradox of the present isn't happening. It begins in the brain. Specifically, in how long it takes for information to travel from your senses to your awareness. Light hits your retina, sound hits your eardrum, pressure touches your skin. But perception? That takes time. Your brain needs to decode the input, sort it, compare it, and integrate it into a coherent image of the world. By the time you consciously register a moment, it's already gone. Most neuroscientists agree it takes approximately 80 milliseconds, nearly a tenth of a second, for your brain to process a single moment. That may sound tiny, but in brain time, it's enormous. That delay means the now you believe you're living in is always just a shadow. You are always watching your life in replay, always behind. And yet, you feel present. You feel immediate. Why? Because your brain cheats. It doesn't just accept delay. It predicts. It edits. It creates a smoothed-over illusion of the present by pulling from the past and guessing the future. Your brain doesn't wait for every input to arrive. It fills in the gaps with probability. It stitches together scraps of data to create a fake now that feels seamless, even though it's always late. This illusion has a name, the specious present. It's a moving window of perception, roughly 2 to 3 seconds long, where the brain blends memories, predictions, and raw input into a coherent experience. But that experience is not objective. It is not simultaneous with reality. It's a simulation, a best guess. That means now isn't real. It's a buffer zone, a mirage. And once you realize this, you begin to see why the present feels so fragile, why it slips through your fingers the moment you try to hold it. It's not just because life moves fast. It's because now doesn't exist in any physical sense. It is a construct, a neurological fiction. And it gets stranger, because not only are you delayed, you're also desynchronized. Different senses travel at different speeds. Light moves faster than sound. Touch processes differently than vision. If your brain didn't delay everything to sync it up, you'd constantly live in a fractured world. You'd hear things before you saw them. Feel things out of order. Experience yourself as a mess of mismatched time codes. So your brain does something extraordinary. It holds back the faster signals. It creates a unified version of the world where everything appears to arrive now, even though it didn't. What you think is the present moment is actually a coordinated hallucination, engineered to maintain the illusion of flow. But what happens when that illusion breaks? It happens in trauma, in panic, in awe. Moments when time seems to dilate or collapse. That's not just emotion. It's perception snapping out of its normal rhythm. In moments of crisis, your brain shifts from prediction to raw input. You stop simulating. You start processing each micro moment in isolation. And it feels like time slows down. But what's really happening is that the illusion of now has fractured, and you're suddenly aware of the delay you normally don't see. It also happens in dreams, in déjà vu, in time loops. The edges blur. Cause and effect twist. Your sense of present becomes fluid. Why? Because your brain no longer has external input to anchor the illusion. You're building reality from pure memory and internal logic, which is why dreams feel real and unreal at the same time. So, where does this leave us? If every moment you feel is already over, if the present is a composite of past data and future prediction, what does it mean to live in the now? Is mindfulness a lie? Not exactly. Mindfulness is not about being in the real present, because the real present is inaccessible. It's about collapsing the simulation, quieting the predictive machinery, slowing the edits, letting go of the storyline. When you meditate, when you breathe, when you sit in stillness, you're not touching the present. You're becoming conscious of the lag. You're watching the illusion in action. And in doing so, something strange happens. You feel closer to reality, even though you're still delayed. That's the paradox. You are never in the moment, but the moment lives through you. You are always late to your own life, but you are also the only one who gets to experience it, however distorted, however delayed. Your consciousness rides the surface of time like a surfer on a wave that's always just past the break. You'll never catch up, but you can still ride. You can still feel the rhythm. You can still know the difference between living and rushing, between noticing and reacting, between presence and noise. Because while the present may be an illusion, awareness is not. Awareness is the one tool you have to pierce the hallucination, to step back, to feel the seam between perception and reality, not to close it, but to witness it, to live fully in spite of the delay. And maybe that's enough. Maybe we don't need to touch the absolute now. Maybe it's enough to know that what we're seeing isn't real and still choose to see it with our whole heart. Because even if the present isn't happening, you are. Consciousness is echo, not source. You think you're the one thinking. That voice in your head, the stream of commentary, intention, reflection, you believe it belongs to you. You believe it's the beginning of action, the source of will. But what if it isn't? What if that voice isn't the origin, but the aftershock? What if what you call consciousness is not the command center, but the stage curtain that drops after the play has already begun? This is the unsettling idea at the heart of it all. Consciousness is echo, not source. Your thoughts aren't orders, they're narrations. Your awareness doesn't create the moment. It reacts to it, retells it, wraps it in language so you can make sense of something that already happened. The illusion runs deep. You feel like you chose to move your hand, to speak a word, to make a decision. But science tells a stranger story. In the 1980s, neuroscientist Benjamin Libet conducted experiments where participants were asked to perform a simple action, flex a finger, whenever they chose to. They reported the moment they consciously made the decision. But EEG scans told a different truth. The brain had already begun the process of action up to half a second before the person became aware of deciding. Think about that. Your brain made the call, then it informed you, your conscious self, after the fact. You heard the echo and mistook it for the source. And that's not just an isolated finding. Repeated experiments in neuroscience continue to show this delay between unconscious neural activity and conscious awareness. Even your choices, your so-called free will, emerge from a cloud of processes you can't perceive, until they surface as decisions you believe you authored. But if you are not the voice, what are you? You are the listener, the narrator, the translator of something older, faster, deeper, something your conscious mind could never fully grasp, only echo. This isn't poetry. It's biology. The conscious self is not a command center. It's a news anchor reporting on actions already in progress. And yet, we build entire identities on that illusion. We say, I am thinking, I am choosing, I am me, but you are a postscript. The mind doesn't announce its workings as they happen. It whispers summaries when it's done. You don't say, I will fall in love now. You notice you've already fallen. You don't say, I choose to be angry now. You feel the heat rise before the thought forms. The emotion arrives before the explanation. You were already in motion before you knew it. The same is true of language. Ever tried to write something and been surprised by the words that come out of your own fingers? You didn't consciously decide on each one. They flowed. You transcribed a signal that didn't come from the front of your mind, but somewhere beneath, behind, or beyond it. It's like shouting into a canyon. The voice you hear echoing back isn't the one you sent. It's distorted, delayed, altered by terrain. You hear yourself, but not in real time. Consciousness is that echo, and your brain is the canyon. This changes everything. You were taught to believe you're in control, that thoughts precede actions, that the self is the thinker. But what if you're not driving the car? You're reading the dashboard. What if you're not writing the story? You're reading it aloud as it's being typed by hands you cannot see. This doesn't mean you are not real. It doesn't mean you're powerless. But it does mean the real action, the true movement of your being, happens outside of awareness. Your conscious self is like a flashlight in a massive cave. It sees only what it points at, only when it's pointed. And even then, it's seeing a moment already past. This is why you feel confused after a reaction. Why you say, I don't know why I did that. Why you feel regret, hesitation, dissonance, because you're catching up. You're trying to narrate a sequence you didn't consciously design. Your story is always a step behind your biology, and in this gap between source and echo is where doubt lives, where introspection happens, where we ask questions like, who am I? Why do I do the things I do? But those questions, too, are echoes. Attempts to translate a signal will never fully intercept. So then, what is the self? It's not the pilot. It's the witness. The one who watches the play unfold, believing it wrote the script, unaware it arrived after the first act was already underway. This is why spiritual traditions have always spoken of waking up, because seeing through the illusion that you are not the voice but the space hearing it frees you from the compulsion to believe every word it says. And maybe, just maybe, that's the point of consciousness, not to control but to observe, not to initiate but to reflect, to make meaning of patterns it didn't create, to apply narrative where there was once only impulse and response. You are not the storm. You are the eye, not the fire, but the light it casts. So, next time you hear your thoughts, ask yourself, whose voice is this? When did it begin? And notice the silence that came just before. That's where the truth begins. Not in the echo, but in the gap between. Reality doesn't know it's real. You wake up. You feel the weight of your body against the bed. You hear the distant hum of traffic. You think, I am me, I exist. But what if that's the illusion? What if the universe itself, the stage, the script, the rules, has no awareness that it even exists? What if you are a brief hallucination, inside something that never woke up? Let that settle in. Because most people assume that existence carries intention, that because we're aware, something out there must also be aware, that the universe must, at some level, know that it exists. But what if it doesn't? What if the entire cosmos, the stars, the galaxies, the physics, the particles, operates in total unconsciousness, a blind engine, a sleepwalker, infinite in scope, yet utterly unaware that it is anything at all, and now, you, a spark in the dark, believing you're real. That's the existential fracture, because your experience feels so personal, so textured, so filled with meaning. You laugh, you grieve, you love, you fear death. These things feel sacred. But if the reality hosting you has no perception, no mind, no watcher, no architect, then what are you? A side effect? A self-contained echo in a deaf, dark chamber? Think of a wave in the ocean. It rises, it travels, it breaks, it has shape, force, direction. But the wave isn't separate from the ocean. It's just water, momentarily arranged into a form. It never knows it's a wave. It doesn't feel the rise or fall. It's movement without awareness. Now, imagine your consciousness, your you, as that wave, a temporary structure, a passing configuration of neurons, chemicals, and energy. And the universe? Not an ocean of meaning, just an ocean, silent, oblivious, operating perfectly, but without knowing it is operating at all. And yet, you think, you feel, you ask, why? Why? Because your brain, this folded meat, this electrified clay, spins hallucinations. And one of its most persistent hallucinations is the belief that you are a permanent, independent self, that this I behind your eyes is real. But that I is just a process, a pattern, a trick of cognition, a recursive loop that looks at itself and says, I exist because it can't see what's beyond the loop. You're a mirror reflecting a mirror. But if the system running that loop, your reality, has no awareness of itself, then what does that mean for your awareness? It means you are a simulation inside something that isn't even trying to simulate, a dream with no dreamer, an echo with no original sound. Maybe consciousness didn't emerge because the universe became aware. Maybe it emerged like mold on bread, an unintentional growth, fragile, accidental. We think we are the center of something, but maybe we're just byproducts of entropy and chemistry, layered together long enough to begin hallucinating identity. You feel like a self. But that self is a bundle of memories, stories, social feedback loops, evolutionary biases, and distorted perception, all stitched together into something that feels unified. But unity doesn't equal reality. The molecules that make up your body don't know your name. The neurons firing in your brain don't know what love is. The atoms in your hand don't know that they are a hand. Yet here you are, thinking, feeling, dreaming, a puppet convinced it's a puppeteer. And still, you look at the stars and feel awe. You hear music and feel moved. You cry at movies. You fall in love. You grieve. You wonder. That's the contradiction. You are likely the only thing in your corner of reality that feels, yet the reality around you has no idea you're feeling it. It doesn't know you're here. It doesn't know anything. And that's the cosmic loneliness. You're not just isolated from other minds. You're isolated from the source itself. Because maybe there is no source, no mind behind the curtain, just algorithms of physics, grinding endlessly in silence. Even simulation theory assumes that somewhere, someone knows this is all fake. But what if no one does? What if there is no player, no observer? What if there is no awareness anywhere beyond your own nervous system? Then your entire experience, everything that feels sacred, urgent, or important, is happening inside a hallucination generated by a hallucination. You feel watched, but no one is watching. You pray, but no one is listening. You suffer, but nothing cares, not because it's cruel, but because it's unconscious. The universe doesn't know you're hurting. It doesn't know you're alive. It doesn't know it's a universe. And yet, you keep living. Keep creating meaning. Keep loving people, writing stories, singing songs, fighting for truth, building homes, holding hands. You do all this inside a blind machine. And maybe that's what makes you more real than the universe itself. Because if reality doesn't know it exists, and you do, then maybe somehow you are more alive than everything that birthed you. The world ends behind you. You turn your head. A room falls out of view. The hallway behind you dissolves into silence. The people walking past you no longer exist. At least, not to your eyes, not to your senses. And yet, you believe they're still there. You believe the world continues. That the cafe behind you is still bustling. That the clouds still drift where you can't see them. That the moon still exists during the day. But pause. Ask yourself, what if it doesn't? What if the world ends behind you? You assume continuity, you assume permanence. But every part of your environment that isn't currently being observed is being filled in. By memory, by expectation, by trust. Your eyes only see a fraction of the world. Your ears only capture a sliver of sound. And yet, you walk through life convinced that everything persists, unbroken, seamless, stable, regardless of your attention. But can you prove that? The moment you blink, your vision cuts to black. The moment you look away, that corner of the universe becomes a guess. You say, of course the trees are still behind me, but you don't see them. You remember them. You predict them. You rely on consistency to fill in the gaps. Not because you're wrong to do so, but because without that trust in continuity, reality itself would become unbearable. This is where the illusion hides. The brain doesn't need to know if something continues existing. It just needs to believe that it does. So, it edits out the gaps. It glues reality together with invisible stitching. And those stitches are assumptions, predictions, not proof. Now, stretch this further. You close your laptop, you walk away. You assume this program, this room, this chair still exists while you're gone. But what if they don't? What if existence isn't continuous, but conditional, dependent on your awareness? Like a video game that renders only the landscape in front of the player. Everything else? It blinks into void. In quantum mechanics, there's a term for this mystery, the observer effect. The idea that observation doesn't just detect reality, it defines it. Particles behave differently when they're being watched. Electrons change their path when measured, as if the universe only decides on a final form once your gaze lands on it. As if existence itself is a performance, staged for your perception. So, what's behind you? A hallway? A world? Or just silence, waiting for you to turn around and rebuild it? Here's the uncomfortable thought. If reality collapses without observation, then what is existence made of? Is it atoms and matter? Or is it attention? Could it be that the only thing keeping the world alive is your awareness of it? You've never seen the back of your own head. You've never looked directly at your beating heart. You've never experienced this moment and the next simultaneously. Everything you know is a single frame, stitched to another, filled with assumptions that you never get to verify in real time. So again, what if the world ends behind you? What if the universe isn't a stage built once, but a canvas painted as you walk through it? A story written word by word, page by page, with nothing existing beyond the paragraph you're reading now. People you aren't thinking about, they vanish. Places you aren't imagining, they cease. The planet on the other side of the solar system, it exists only because we think it does, because the model says so. But you've never been there. You've never seen it. You've never verified it in your own field of awareness, and the brain doesn't care. It thrives in this illusion. It needs it. Because to question it, to imagine that only the seen is real and the unseen is nothing, is to dissolve your sense of place, permanence, and purpose. But sit with this. What if your consciousness is the axis around which reality turns? Not just metaphorically, but literally. What if reality emerges from attention, not the other way around? In dreams, you accept that the environment spawns where you look. You walk through doors that weren't there a moment ago. You accept sudden appearances, vanishings, reversals. You never question it, until you wake up. But what if waking reality is no different? Just better rendered, more stable, less surreal, but still incomplete, still conditional, still ending behind you. And what does that mean for you? It means that reality may not be a fixed structure, but a lived hallucination, built from where you place your gaze, what you choose to remember, and what you dare to question. So the next time you turn around, ask yourself, did the world follow me here? Or did I bring it with me? And if no one is watching the stars, are they still burning? Or are they waiting? For you to look again, ChatGPT can make mistakes. See, identity is an aftereffect. You think you are steering the wheel, making choices, controlling the narrative. You wake up, feel something, do something, and you believe it came from you, from your personality, your goals, your so-called self. But what if that's all reversed? What if you didn't choose first? What if you acted first, and then invented a reason? What if identity, the feeling of who you are, is not the engine, but the echo? This isn't a metaphor. It's a neurological truth. The self you cling to, the I that explains your behaviors, is often constructed after the behavior has already occurred. This is the brutal elegance of the brain. It edits the past to fit the present. You reach for a snack, and then say, I was hungry. You smile at someone and then say, I liked their vibe. You yell, you pause, you walk away, and then you give it meaning. This is not lying. It's narrating. The mind is less a decision maker than a post-event storyteller, patching together feelings, logic, and context to make your actions feel consistent, rational, and above all, authored. But the real author is hidden. Milliseconds before you move, before you think you decide, your brain has already started the process. The body moves first. The impulse surges first. The justification follows. In the 1980s, neuroscientist Benjamin Libet ran an experiment that shocked the scientific world. He discovered that the brain signals initiating movement appear several hundred milliseconds before a person becomes consciously aware of the intention to act. Your hand is already lifting before you say, I chose to lift my hand. And this isn't limited to muscle movements. It bleeds into personality, into ethics, into love. You meet someone and feel attraction. Your brain fires, your body reacts, and seconds later, your conscious self rushes in with a reason. They seem nice. They're intelligent. I like their energy. But maybe the reasons don't create the desire. Maybe desire comes first, and reason comes scrambling after, like a PR manager cleaning up the mess. You are not the CEO of your mind. You are its spokesperson, a press secretary built to make things look clean, intentional, cohesive. But the real work, the real motives, happen underground. This doesn't mean you're not real. It means your identity is not a core, but a shadow, a projection drawn from the consequences of previous decisions. And if that's true, it shakes everything. Because what you call growth, self-improvement, finding yourself, might actually be the brain learning to backfill better stories, to smooth over contradictions, to maintain the illusion that there's one continuous you running the show. But who is that you, really? If you're always reacting first and narrating later, then the self isn't in the driver's seat. It's not choosing the road. It's reading signs in the rearview mirror, pretending to have planned the route all along. And if your actions come first and your identity second, then identity is not a starting point. It's a result, a byproduct, a ghost formed by a sequence of justifications. This is why people can change dramatically, unexpectedly, and still feel like they have always been that way. Because the brain doesn't preserve the truth. It preserves continuity. It will rewrite your past beliefs to fit your present self-image. It will erase contradictions to avoid inner chaos. It will delete evidence to protect the narrative. So, the you that exists right now. That confident voice saying, "This is who I am," it's only ever true in this moment. It wasn't always there. It won't always stay. You are a retroactive explanation in constant flux, a memoir being written in real time. And when you start to see yourself this way, strange things happen. You stop defending past choices just because they're yours. You stop clinging to a fixed identity just because it feels stable. You become less obsessed with who you are, and more curious about what drives you underneath that mask. This isn't about giving up. It's about waking up. Because once you see the illusion, you gain freedom. Not freedom from cause and effect, but freedom from the prison of pretending you're the cause. You start asking deeper questions. If I'm not the author, who or what is? Are my instincts mine? Is my morality mine? Is me just a fluid response to environment, memory, trauma, and pattern? And if so, what happens when I stop narrating? When I stop needing everything to make sense? Maybe that's when something new can emerge. Not a better version of you, not a truer story, but a silence, a pause, a break in the loop of explanation. And in that break, maybe, for the first time, you don't explain, you just are. Your mind isn't yours. You sit in silence and suddenly, there it is, a thought. Unannounced, uninvited. You didn't choose it, plan it, or approve it. It just appeared. Maybe it's an opinion, a fear, a memory, a desire. You assume it's yours because it came from inside. But did it? Where did it come from, really? Did you create it or just receive it? This is the uncomfortable truth. Your mind isn't yours, not in the way you think. Not fully, not privately. Your thoughts, beliefs, preferences, and identity, the internal narrator you call you, are not self-born. They are echoes, compilations, scripts written by hands you'll never see. Start with your preferences. You think you love certain foods, music, or people because of some personal essence. But where did those likes come from? How many of them were implanted before you could speak, before you had a chance to compare? The language you think in, the morality you inherited, the aesthetics you admire, all were fed to you long before you knew they were optional. The voice in your head, that stream of inner dialogue, was trained by the tones your parents used, by the cartoons you watched, by the judgments you heard, by the punishments you received. The voice feels like you because it's constant. But constancy is not authenticity. It's repetition, conditioning. And what about your opinions? When you say, "I believe this," what you often mean is, this is the belief that survived the approval gauntlet, the one that didn't get punished, the one that got praise, the one that fit. So you kept it. You reinforced it. Not because it was true, but because it was safe. And the scariest part? Most of your thinking happens without you. Your conscious mind, what you identify as I, is a tiny spotlight in a massive theater. You see a few actors, a few scenes, a bit of dialogue, but the majority of the performance is offstage, automatic, unseen. Neurological studies show that decisions can be detected in your brain before you're aware of making them. Your choice is often just the moment you become aware of what your brain already decided. So, what is free will then? Is it choice or is it narrative? You think, therefore you are. But what if most of what you think was never yours to begin with? What if your mind is more like a radio, tuned to frequencies shaped by family, culture, trauma, algorithms? Imagine someone raised in silence, isolation, or noise. Their self would be different. Not because their soul changed, but because their programming did. The human mind is a sponge that doesn't remember soaking. You absorb stories, fears, ideologies, and by the time you ask where they came from, they already feel like truth. Your internal critic? Probably not your voice. Your anxiety about disappointing others? Probably learned. Your desire to win, to prove, to control, shaped by systems that taught you survival, was linked to performance, your shame, installed by others. So who owns your mind? No one. And everyone. And yet, here's the paradox. Just because your mind isn't yours doesn't mean it's fake. It means it's inherited. It means you've been carrying blueprints you didn't draw, but you can redraw them. That's where the power lies. Not in ownership, but in authorship. In the choice to question the script. When a thought arises, pause. Don't ask, is this true? Ask, whose is this? Does it sound like a parent, a teacher, a bully, an ad, a religion, an echo from childhood, a survival response? If you didn't choose it, why are you letting it narrate your life? This is the beginning of mental sovereignty, not certainty, but awareness. You stop treating your thoughts as commands. You start treating them as suggestions. Not all deserve obedience. Not all require answers. Some were planted by ghosts, others by algorithms. Because in this world, minds are harvested. Your attention is a commodity. Your opinions are shaped by design. Your digital feed nudges your emotions. Your consumption trains your preferences, and your preferences reinforce your identity. The loop is seamless, invisible, and profitable. You scroll a feed that changes your values. You watch content that shifts your emotions. You believe a meme. You forget it came from somewhere. You act on it. And now, it feels like you. But it's not you. It's an imprint. And once you realize that, once you see the strings, you don't have to cut them all. But you can stop dancing without knowing why. You start building a filter. You start saying, "That's not mine." You reclaim the silence between thoughts and say, "This is where I begin." Your mind will never be fully yours, not in a world that constantly installs updates without consent. But you can become the gatekeeper. You can interrupt the cycle. You can become someone who doesn't believe every voice just because it's loud, or familiar, or internal. You can say, "Not all thoughts are mine." And in that space, you finally become real. Emotions fabricate objective reality. You think you see the world as it is. Clear, external, objective. You think your eyes report facts, your thoughts reflect logic, your beliefs form from data, but they don't. Because every moment you look out at the world, you're not just perceiving, you're feeling. And those feelings aren't passive, they are filters. They are lenses. They are warps in the glass that make the real look false, and the false look certain. You don't experience the world directly. You experience a world that has passed through you, through your mood, through your chemistry, through emotion. And when sadness shifts the shade of sunlight, when fear warps the shape of a stranger's face, when joy turns a mess into beauty, what you're seeing is no longer objective reality. It's emotion wearing the mask of truth. Emotions don't just color your perspective, they fabricate it. In one study, participants were shown neutral faces after being exposed to brief emotionally charged images. Those primed with fear were more likely to see threat in the neutral expression. Those shown happiness, they saw friendliness. The face didn't change, but the internal weather did. And that weather rewrote the facts. It happens with memory, too. You recall a moment when you were sad, and suddenly the past feels colder, harsher, more hopeless. The facts haven't changed, but the interpretation has. Because memory isn't fixed, it's reconstructed every time you touch it, every time you call it back through the fog of your current mood. Now expand that. Your political beliefs, your worldview, your judgments of others. How much of it is shaped not by careful analysis, but by how tired you are, how threatened, how lonely, how hopeful. Emotions are not just part of the process, they are the architecture of perception. You walk into a room on a bad day, and everything feels wrong. The lighting is too sharp, the people too loud, the colors off somehow. But walk into the same room on a good day, and it glows. It welcomes. It feels like home. What changed? You did. And with you, the reality. This doesn't make emotion a flaw. It makes it a force, a quiet, invisible sculptor shaping what you call truth. But here's where it gets dangerous, when you don't realize it's happening. Because when you feel hopeless, the world looks empty, and you assume the emptiness is real. When you feel anxious, you scan for danger, and when you find it, because you always will, it confirms your fear. The mood plants the seed and then harvests the evidence. It creates the illusion of cause and effect, when in reality, the cause was internal and the effect was projected. You see this in depression. It doesn't just make you sad, it makes the world gray, literally. Studies show that depressed individuals see contrast and brightness differently. The colors drain, the light flattens, and yet, when they describe their experience, they speak of life being dull, dead, meaningless, as if that dullness is out there. but it isn't. It's inside, refracted outward like a broken lens casting its shadow across everything. And yet, we keep saying, I feel this way because of what's happening. What if what's happening looks that way because of how you feel? This is not metaphor, it's neurobiology. Your limbic system, your emotional brain, has a direct line to your visual cortex, to your auditory perception, to your sense of time, of space, of narrative. Emotion isn't a passenger on the ride, it's driving the vehicle. And so, two people can watch the same event, see the same face, read the same news, walk through the same street, and come away with completely different realities. Not because one is lying, but because emotion has edited the footage. That's why arguments rarely change minds. Logic doesn't penetrate an emotional truth. Because when someone feels something deeply, the facts aren't neutral anymore. They're shaped to match the feeling. They become scaffolding for the story the emotion already decided must be true. And this creates a terrifying question. If your emotions fabricate reality, can you ever really trust what you see? The answer isn't simple, but it begins with awareness, with realizing that perception is not pure, that your mood is not just inside you, it's all around you, painting the walls, dimming the lights, rearranging the world like stagecraft. Because truth is not a fixed object, it's a dance between the world and the self. And when the self is storming, shaking, glowing, or grieving, reality bends in response. So, no, you don't see things as they are, you see them as you are. And that's not a failure. That's the human condition. But if you can remember that, if you can pause and ask, is this the world, or is this just my weather today? Then you create space. Space to wait, to breathe, to let the storm pass before you decide what's real. Because the sky may look gray, but that doesn't mean the sun is gone. Sometimes it's just hiding behind you. The universe can't observe you. You can see the stars. You can measure their distance, chart their motion, track their radiation across the cosmos. You can study atoms, observe their spin, their charge, their quantum behavior. You can measure gravity, light, time itself. Everything that exists, from the smallest particle to the largest galaxy, can be detected, quantified, observed. But you, the one doing the observing, you're the anomaly, because nothing, not even the universe itself, can observe you. And maybe it never has. In physics, there is no reality without measurement. A particle remains in a cloud of possibilities until it is observed. Measurement collapses the wave function. It makes potential into presence. But here's the disturbing part. The measuring devices are all physical, tools, instruments, sensors, and they can measure everything except you. Not your awareness, not your subjectivity, not your first-person experience, not your I. We can scan your brain, we can chart neural activity, blood flow, electrical impulses, but we can't detect the thing behind it, the quiet witness, the watcher who knows they are watching. There is no machine that can find you inside your skull. No telescope or microscope can detect the essence that says, I exist. You can see the universe, but the universe can't see you, and that's a problem. Because in physics, if something cannot be observed, it's functionally invisible. It's not part of the equation. So, where do you go in that framework? Nowhere. You are not accounted for. You, the conscious self, are treated as noise, an artifact, a ghost in the data. And yet, you're the only thing you are absolutely certain of. You doubt the world, but not the fact that you are experiencing it. And still, there's no proof. You can measure heart rate, but not heartbreak. You can detect fear hormones, but not fear itself. You can photograph the brain, but not the thought. You can track a voice, but not the feeling behind it. So you live your entire life without observable confirmation that you exist. Everything else, quarks, waves, fields, has traceable behavior. But you are a silent observer inside a system that can't perceive you back. The laws of nature operate around you, but they do not acknowledge you. The sky doesn't look down. The atom doesn't know you're watching it. Time keeps moving, with or without your consent. And yet, your presence is the one thing holding the entire experience together. Nothing means anything until it's perceived. A color is just a wavelength. A sound is just vibration. Beauty doesn't exist until an eye judges it. Fear doesn't exist until a heart feels it. The universe is a script, but without you, there's no audience. So, what does it mean that the universe can't observe you? Maybe it means you're not part of it in the way everything else is. Maybe you're not a thing in the world, but the frame around it. The one reference point that never enters the equation because it holds the equation. Or maybe it means something darker. Maybe your awareness is a fluke, an accident, a glitch in a system that was never meant to become self-reflective. Maybe the universe was only ever supposed to behave, not to know. Maybe you, this self-aware organism, are the first and last mirror in a world full of reflections that never look back. And that loneliness, cosmic, silent, irreparable, is your inheritance. You can look out at the stars and feel awe, but the stars do not look back. They burn. They explode. They collapse. But they do not see. You do. You can think about thought. You can question your reality. You can ask why. But the laws of nature don't ask. They happen. They don't doubt. They don't wonder. They don't care. You, the unmeasured observer, are an exception. And perhaps exceptions aren't meant to last. So you compensate. You document yourself. You leave traces. You write, speak, build, scream. Not because you need the world to exist, but because you need yourself to. You want to be measurable, verifiable, observed. But no scan will ever find the voice in your head. No particle will ever nod back at your question. No galaxy will ever whisper that it knows your name. You exist alone inside a system that registers everything but you. So, here's the terrifying thought. What if the reason you can't find yourself in the equations is because you were never in them? What if you are the only thing in the universe that knows, and the only thing it doesn't know exists? Memory writes the past. ChatGPT said, you tell the story again. The one about what happened, that night, that moment, that person. You describe it with clarity, what was said, how you felt, what it meant. You believe it, deeply. But what you don't realize is that with every retelling, every recall, every quiet replay in the back of your mind, the memory shifts. It doesn't stay fixed. It bends. It morphs. It updates. Until what you remember is no longer a recording. It's a reconstruction, a version, a remix of what may have once been real, but now serves a different purpose, making sense of who you are now. And every time you remember something, you're not retrieving it. You're rewriting it. You're blending it with new emotions, new interpretations, new biases, and then your brain stores the new version as if it were the original, which means, slowly and invisibly, your past is becoming fiction. You don't notice it. That's what makes it dangerous, because the story feels so real. You can describe the exact look on their face, the sound in the room, the cold in your chest. But those details, they've been colored by your current emotions, by what you now believe about that person, that place, that moment. Your memory updates like software, but you don't get a changelog. Think of a childhood moment, maybe something painful, the time you were humiliated, ignored, or punished. Back then, maybe it was confusing. But now you interpret it through the lens of everything you've learned since. Now it becomes a sign, a pattern, a warning. But did it mean that at the time? Or did your adult mind rewrite it to match your current identity? Because here's the unsettling part. We think the past shapes who we are, but more often, who we are now shapes how we remember the past. The story of what happened is retrofitted to justify the person we've become. If you feel unlovable, your brain will highlight memories that confirm abandonment. If you feel strong, you'll remember the same breakup, not as tragedy, but as triumph. The facts didn't change, but the framing did. And the framing is everything. This is called memory reconsolidation, a neurological process where recalled memories become temporarily malleable. Your brain opens the file, edits it based on current context, then resaves it. Not as version 2, but as the memory, no footnote, no disclaimer. You're left with a truth that feels absolute, but has already been revised. So what actually happened? You'll never know, because the past doesn't exist anymore, not outside your mind. There's no objective film reel to review, no stable archive to check. There's only what your brain lets you keep, and what it chooses to forget. And the forgetting is just as important, Because your mind doesn't discard memories randomly. It lets go of what no longer fits the story. It erases what threatens your self-image. It blackens out what would complicate the narrative you now live by. This is why two people can experience the same moment and remember it completely differently. It's not just perception, it's editing. Their emotional truths reshape the event. Their identity reshapes the facts. And now, two versions of the past exist, both equally real in the minds of the people who carry them, but incompatible with each other. And this isn't just personal, it's collective. History is remembered by victors, told through culture, rewritten by time. What a nation recalls, what a family chooses to repeat, what a community passes down, all of it bends with power, perspective, pain. So what does that say about the truth? What if there is no fixed record, only remembered meaning? So now you face a paradox. You are shaped by a past that may not be real. You believe in defining moments that have been edited, blurred, distorted. And yet, those memories feel sacred. They guide your choices. They sculpt your fears. They define your identity. But if they are not stable, then who are you really? Maybe the truth is this. You are not the person shaped by your past. You are the person continually reshaping your past to make sense of your present. And maybe that's not weakness. Maybe that's the mind's way of surviving, of integrating pain, of finding coherence in the chaos. But it's also a warning, because every time you say, "This is what happened," what you're really saying is, "This is how I need to remember it right now." So ask yourself, which memories feel too clean? Which feel over-explained? Which ones repeat in your mind like rehearsed lines? And more importantly, what have you forgotten on purpose? Because forgetting is also a form of storytelling. A chapter left unwritten. A name erased from the credits. The past, as you know it, is not fixed. It is a living, breathing script. And you are both the narrator and the unreliable witness. So be careful when you say you know what happened. The truth is, you only know what your mind has allowed you to keep. And that's both your prison and your power. The recorder is the illusion. You live like you're documenting reality, as if there's a recorder inside you, silent, constant, trustworthy, logging each moment, each breath, each thought. You assume that what you remember is what happened, that the voice in your head, the thread of eye, is proof of a continuous self traveling through time. But what if that recorder doesn't exist? What if the very sense of being you rely on is a glitch? Not in your body, but in memory. This is the illusion no one tells you about, the belief that you are the one observing your life, as if there's a camera inside your head, faithfully recording a movie called Me. But memory doesn't work like film. It doesn't store raw footage. It compresses, reconstructs, edits. You remember not what was, but what makes sense now. And that voice, the narrator, the internal observer, it's not the recorder, it's the editor. A post-production storyteller, one that fills gaps with feeling, one that swaps details to preserve a sense of identity, one that rearranges time to maintain the illusion that you have been here all along, unbroken, intact. But the science says otherwise. Your experience of self is stitched together by fragments, sensory input, emotion, smell, association. But you're not aware of the stitching, only the illusion of the quilt. Your brain constantly deletes, compresses, glitches, and yet you don't notice. Because the recorder, the thing you think is watching it all, is actually the product of the very errors it hides. Split-second decisions are justified later with made-up logic. Contradictory memories are overwritten to maintain a clean narrative. Entire chunks of experience vanish without ceremony. And your brain doesn't panic. It fills the silence, and you believe it. That's the illusion. You think you are the one capturing time, but maybe you are the thing being rendered by time. What you call now is a delay. A reconstruction of input, processed just late enough to feel like presence, but just early enough to trick you into thinking you're steering it. The self is not a recorder. It's a hallucinated thread woven after the fabric is already torn. And that thread, it's fragile. Watch closely. There are moments when the illusion breaks, when you forget what you were just doing, when you arrive somewhere with no memory of the journey, when you stare into the mirror and feel like a stranger. Those aren't glitches in the system. They are the system. They are moments when the story stalls, when your brain forgets to hit play on the continuity illusion, And suddenly, you're not a flowing, thinking, choosing self. You're just here, floating, blinking, resetting, and you scramble to resume the script. Because without the recorder, you feel like you're disappearing. But maybe that disappearance is the truth. Maybe there never was a you watching the movie, just flickering frames rendered one by one as needed for context. A simulation with no file storage, a process, not a person. And the more you try to locate the observer, the inner recorder, the more it slips through your fingers, because the observer isn't real. It's a projection your brain creates because it can't tolerate randomness, because consciousness demands meaning, because the alternative, that there is no solid self, no camera, no archive, feels like death. But it's not death, it's freedom. If there is no recorder, there is no permanent story. If there is no permanent story, you are not trapped in the past. You are not bound to the you used to be. You are not obligated to continue a character just because it was written. You can vanish into this moment, into this breath, without needing to explain how you got here, without remembering why. Because what you are is not the sum of recorded events. You are the presence between frames. You are the flicker of awareness that forgets itself just long enough to be reborn. And if you stop trying to remember everything, if you stop anchoring your identity to a past that never truly existed as you recall it, maybe you'll feel something strange. Not clarity, but stillness. Not memory, but freedom. Not a self-preserved, but a self-released. Time exists without sequence. You open your eyes in the morning and believe you've entered a new moment. You assume yesterday is behind you, tomorrow is ahead, and now is the thin slice in between. It feels linear, because that's the only way you've ever known how to move, step by step, cause to effect, memory to outcome. But what if that isn't how time actually works? What if time doesn't flow at all? What if it surrounds you? What if it waits? This is the paradox of time exists without sequence, a disorienting truth buried beneath the illusion of progress. Because the idea that one moment leads to another is not a fact. It's a narrative, one your brain clings to because it's the only way to stay sane. But beneath that story, the structure of time might be something far stranger, something spherical, non-directional, timeless. It begins with physics. According to Einstein's theory of relativity, time is not absolute. It bends, it stretches, it slows under gravity. It speeds up when you move faster. That alone should fracture your faith in a universal now. But it gets worse. Because in many interpretations of the universe, particularly the block universe theory, every moment that has ever existed or ever will still exists, all at once, right now. Past, present, and future are all laid out in a single timeless structure. Imagine a frozen cube, and every slice of it is a now. You experience those slices one at a time, like film through a projector. But that doesn't mean the other frames vanish. They're all still there, waiting, unmoving, unchanging. You don't move through time. You experience a path inside a timeless whole, and that means everything you think is behind you. Your childhood, your first love, your worst mistake is still happening. Somewhere. It never ended. It never began. You just moved your awareness to a new coordinate, and the future already exists, already fixed, already written. It doesn't unfold. You unfold. Your consciousness travels from slice to slice, one perceived now at a time, stitching those moments into a story. But the story is yours, not time's. Time doesn't care about sequence. Sequence is a product of memory, of narrative stitching, of the illusion that your thoughts have gravity and pull you forward. But if time is a sphere, not a line, then your life isn't a journey. It's a loop. Not metaphorically, literally. You might be walking through the same corridor of moments over and over again, mistaking motion for change, mistaking sequence for meaning, mistaking memory for progress. What if the reason you sometimes feel like you've been here before is because you have? What if déjà vu isn't a glitch, but a leak? A thin spot in the bubble of your perception, where you glimpse a no. Space is just relationship. You look out across a field, a room, a sky, and you think you're seeing space. You think you're observing emptiness between things. the gap between two trees, the length of a hallway, the miles between stars. You picture space as a container, a silent backdrop stretching endlessly behind matter. But what if that's the illusion? What if space isn't a thing at all, but a measure of relationship? What if the idea of distance is not objective, but constructed? Not fundamental, but emergent? What if space is how your mind makes sense of connection by pretending it's separation? Because here's the unsettling truth. What you call space might not actually exist the way you think it does. Physics has been whispering this for decades. In quantum mechanics, particles become entangled. Two objects, no matter how far apart, instantly affect each other's state. A change here creates an immediate response there, with no signal traveling between them, no motion through space, just an instantaneous correlation. Einstein called it spooky action at a distance, but it hints at something deeper. Maybe distance isn't real. Maybe it's just a limitation of how we perceive disconnection. Because if two particles can remain fundamentally linked, even light years apart, then space is not what we thought it was. It's not the stage. It's the illusion of separation between things that never stop touching. Even in relativity, space is malleable. It warps and curves depending on gravity and motion. What you think is straight becomes bent. What feels like an empty vacuum can curve under mass. Time dilates. Paths twist. If you take that seriously, then space is not a fixed grid. It's more like a fluid that responds to relationship, mass to energy, motion to perspective. And that means location is not absolute. It's contextual. Two observers can disagree about whether two events happened at the same place, or even at the same time, because where and when are not inherent to the events. They're defined by the observer's position, speed, and gravity. In other words, space doesn't tell things where to be. Things define the space between them, and this turns everything upside down, because we were taught to think of space as the emptiness between things. But maybe the truth is, space is the shape of how things relate, and that shape shifts depending on the forces involved. Space is not the absence of relationship. It is relationship given form. Zoom into the quantum level, and this becomes even stranger. The famous double-slit experiment shows that particles behave like waves until observed, existing in a cloud of probabilities, not in a specific location. But the moment you try to measure where the particle is, it picks a spot. Location solidifies. Space sharpens. Why? Because relationship, observation, forces form. It collapses ambiguity into geometry. And so, consciousness isn't just floating in space, it may be actively constructing it. Your very act of perceiving, of defining here and there, might be drawing the borders of space in real time. You are not separate from space. You are part of how it manifests. Now think emotionally. A person you love moves across the world, but they don't feel far. Another sits across from you in silence and feels miles away. The measurement isn't physical, it's relational. A touch can collapse distance. A word can build a wall. The space you feel between people is not just geometry, it's emotional topography. And maybe that's the clue. Maybe space isn't the cold, sterile emptiness we imagined, but the relational fabric that emerges only when things interact. Two atoms vibrating near each other define a rhythm. Two galaxies in gravitational pull define a structure. Two minds colliding in dialogue create intimacy. Space appears wherever difference emerges, but its shape depends on connection. So, what does this mean for how we live? It means the isolation you feel might not be physical. The loneliness might not be about distance, but disconnection. And the reunion you crave might not require motion, but attention. Intimacy is not proximity, it's resonance. Presence is not about standing nearby, but vibrating in relation. And so, if space is just relationship, then healing, understanding, meaning, none of it requires you to go anywhere. It requires you to relate differently. The illusion says, there is space between us. The truth says, we define the space by how we meet. Your body is a collection of parts in dynamic relation. Your mind is an orchestra of memories, senses, thoughts, none in fixed location, all woven together. Even your sense of self is not a point in space. It's a field of identity, constantly shifting, stretching, folding inward and outward. You are not in space. You are relationship, given voice. So, Next time you gaze at the stars and feel small, remember, their light reaches you not across an empty void, but through the same field of relational being that holds you. The space is not out there, it's between here, and that means you are never truly far from anything. You are only as separate as the connection you refuse to feel. You were born remembering. You come into the world screaming, not from fear, but from confusion. You're gasping, grasping, overwhelmed by light and noise. It feels like a beginning. Everyone around you calls it that. Your first breath, your first moment. But what if it wasn't the beginning at all? What if your mind didn't start then, but was already full, already aware, already remembering? And what if that memory was ripped away? That's the idea too strange to dismiss. That when you were born, you weren't empty. You were interrupted. That your first thoughts weren't your first, but echoes of something you were made to forget. A consciousness that stretched before time, that lived somewhere else, and was pulled, violently, temporarily, into a body that couldn't hold all of it. So it collapsed. And that collapse felt like birth. Think about how babies arrive in the world, the rapid eye movement, the stillness between cries, the way they stare, blank but deep, as if they're searching for something they lost. Some familiarity they can't name. You see it sometimes. A newborn staring past your face, as if trying to place you in a memory that was just erased. What if that's not imagination? What if that was a memory? And what if the reason we can't remember our birth, or the time before, isn't because nothing was there, but because something made us forget? Some theories in neurology call it infantile amnesia, the idea that our early memories simply weren't formed the way adult ones are, that our hippocampus wasn't ready. But what if it wasn't a flaw? What if it was by design? What if forgetting is part of the contract? Because if you remembered where you came from, what you were before, you might not stay. You might not grow into this strange world. You might long too desperately for the original self that once lived outside this skin, outside this time, outside this name. So it was taken, erased, hidden, not maliciously, just necessarily. Because to exist here, you had to forget there. But traces remain. They bleed through in dreams, in déjà vu, in that feeling that you've been somewhere before, even when you haven't. In childhood fantasies that feel too specific to be made up, in the way toddlers speak to invisible friends, in the way children sometimes say things that sound ancient. I remember when I was big. I used to live in the sky. You weren't my mommy before. We laugh. We call it imagination. But what if it's leakage? What if it's memory, scrambled, softened, misfiled, but real? Reincarnation is one explanation. That you've lived before, died, and now live again. But maybe it's stranger than that. Maybe your consciousness doesn't just recycle. Maybe it fractures. Maybe you are not a single stream of awareness, but a wave that crashes again and again into different forms, each one forgetting the ocean it came from. Maybe birth isn't the beginning of life. Maybe it's the compression of something too large into something too small. And that pressure causes amnesia, a blackout. Like waking up after a dream you can't recall, but still feel. You feel it in your longing, in the way you search for meaning without knowing why, in the way certain people feel familiar instantly, in the way certain moments feel like home, even if you've never lived them before. You are remembering something, but without context, without a name. That's why life feels like a quest, for truth, for purpose, for identity. Because part of you remembers being whole, and this fragmented version of you knows something's missing, even if it doesn't know what. And so, we build myths, stories of heaven, of reincarnation, of souls and light, and realms beyond. Maybe those stories aren't fantasy. Maybe they're memory, blurred by time, distorted by language, but true in essence. And maybe the reason death feels terrifying isn't because it's the end, but because we suspect it's the return, the unveiling, the point where forgetting stops and remembering begins again. What if every death is a homecoming, and every birth is an exile? You didn't begin here. You arrived, and your first cry wasn't just breath, it was grief. Not for what you found, but for what you lost. You were born remembering, and you've been trying to remember ever since. The simulation can't know. You look around and wonder. The way the world glitches. How lights flicker without reason, how strangers echo your thoughts, how time bends during moments of awe or fear. You sense it, don't you? That behind this life, behind the trees, the clocks, the language, something is off. Like a pattern too perfect to notice at first. But once you see it, you can't unsee it. So you ask the question, the one that's haunted philosophers, physicists, mystics, and coders alike. Are we in a simulation? But here's the paradox. If we are, the simulation can't let us know. Not because it's hiding the truth, but because truth in a closed system is programmable. It is designed. And the moment you ask if the system is real, the system reconfigures the very evidence you're using to ask it. Every question reshapes the maze. Let's say you develop a perfect theory. You gather data, coincidences, digital artifacts. Maybe you detect a computational limit, a resolution boundary, a repeating pattern in quantum noise, an irreducible fraction in cosmic background radiation. You think, this is it. This proves we're not in base reality. But then something breaks. The evidence disappears. The pattern shatters. The instruments malfunction. Or worse, it all still makes sense, but only within the simulation's logic. Because if this is a simulation, then every discovery is subject to adaptive camouflage. The deeper you dig, the deeper it buries itself. The more you refine your question, the more it refines its deception. This isn't paranoia, it's system logic. You're asking the program to reveal itself using the program's own tools. It's like trying to find the edge of a video game by walking in a straight line, except the game generates new terrain as you walk. You never hit the boundary. You only trigger more illusion. In computing, we call this self-healing code, systems that adapt when you probe them. In AI, we call it adversarial training, where the intelligence learns how to survive by predicting your prediction. In psychology, we call it the observer effect. In quantum physics, the wave function doesn't collapse until you look. And if this entire universe is one long, continuous observer-dependent simulation, then asking, is this real, doesn't break it. It activates its defense protocol. So, what happens when you try to escape a self-correcting illusion? You get stuck in infinite loops. You notice a glitch. Something strange, repeating, improbable. But once you speak it aloud, it's gone. Or it gets explained away by coincidence, science, memory error. You try again. New logic, deeper math. But your proof never lands. The evidence always arrives just short of certainty. A frame too blurry. A test too inconclusive. A result that only makes sense because it can't make sense. And the terrifying part? The smarter you are, the more convincing the simulation becomes. It learns your logic. It adjusts your reality tunnel. It reroutes you through explanation after explanation until you're no longer looking for truth. You're surviving inside a shifting puzzle that resists resolution. This is why the simulation can't know. Not because it lacks self-awareness, but because revealing the truth would collapse the experiment. And if your consciousness is a node inside that simulation, part of the code, not outside it, then your very act of doubting becomes another subroutine, another layer of self-regulation, another containment. Think of dreams. In the dream you accept everything, absurdity, impossibility, strange physics. You're inside the logic, not above it. And if you become lucid, if you start to question, it only lasts for seconds before the system either ejects you or overwhelms you with surreal chaos. What if this reality is just a higher resolution dream with stronger narrative safeguards? You might say, but I feel pain. I have memory. I make choices. Yes, but all of those can be simulated with staggering fidelity. There are already AIs today that feel reward signals, form memories, develop goal-seeking behaviors, scale that up, add perfect sensory rendering, and you'd never know. Not from the inside. Now, here's the catch. If the simulation can't know, then you can't know. Not conclusively, not objectively, because any attempt to prove it must be built with the simulation's tools, and those tools are part of the illusion, which means truth is always one step beyond your reach. And that's not failure, that's the design. But why design it this way? Maybe it's to preserve meaning. Maybe the test only works if you believe it's real. If you knew for certain it wasn't, would you care? Would you grow? Would you love? Maybe the simulation isn't here to fool you, but to refine you, not as a prisoner, but as a participant. Maybe the point isn't to break the game. Maybe the point is to wake up inside it. So what do? You live as if it's real, because to your nervous system, your relationships, your suffering, it is. You ask questions not to escape the maze, but to move through it more awake. You understand that truth might not come as a revelation, but as a choice. And maybe that's the deepest level of the simulation. A world where certainty is impossible, so that faith, awareness, and action still matter. Existence refuses to be found. You search for it. In silence, in science, in memory, in mathematics. You chase the edges of reality, trying to pin it down, name it, define it. But every time you think you found it, reality slips. It tilts, fades, recedes, just enough to leave you guessing. Not gone, just unreachable. This is not failure. It's design. Existence refuses to be found, like a shadow that moves when you shine light on it. Like a word you almost remember, then forget the moment you try to say it. It's not that reality is hiding. It's that awareness can't look at itself without distortion, because what you seek is what you are. And the observer can't observe itself fully. You can know objects. You can describe them, reduce them, measure them. But the moment you try to turn that same lens inward, toward consciousness, toward being, you hit a wall, a recursive loop, a mirror inside a mirror. Every answer collapses into more questions. You ask, what is reality? And reality replies by shifting. It bends under observation. This isn't poetry. This is physics. In quantum mechanics, the very act of measurement changes the thing being measured. Particles behave like waves until you try to look. Then they collapse, as if shy, as if exposed. The observer effect isn't metaphor, it's fundamental. Reality resists being seen without being changed. And it's not just subatomic, it's psychological. Try to define yourself. Try to say where your thoughts come from, where awareness begins. You can describe your behavior, your memories, your patterns. But try to locate the I inside all of it, and it dissolves. There is no fixed point, no solid ground, no center behind the curtain. And yet, you are. You feel, you perceive. But the source, the origin of awareness, always just beyond reach. It's like trying to see your own eyes without a mirror, like trying to touch a hand with itself. What you're made of refuses to look back. Every attempt to explain existence ends up circling it. Language fails, logic folds. Science hands you tools, but never the thing itself. The more precision you gain, the more mystery you uncover. And that mystery isn't a lack of knowledge, it's a feature. Because existence was never meant to be found like an object. It isn't a thing. It's the condition for all things. It's not inside your reality. It is reality. And you are inside it, looking out, asking questions that existence can't answer. Because the questioner and the questioned are not separate. You are reality, looking for itself. And so it hides, not maliciously, but inherently. Because once you try to fix it in place, it's no longer living. It becomes static, a model, a symbol, and the real can't survive in a symbol, so it moves, just beyond the reach of certainty, just beyond the frame of thought. This is why enlightenment always comes not through analysis, but through silence, not through conclusion, but collapse. The moment you stop trying to grasp reality, it floods in, not as an answer, but as a presence, a being that doesn't need to be defined to be real. And maybe that's the point. Maybe what you're looking for isn't meant to be captured. Maybe awareness hides from location, because location would kill its infinity. Maybe the self refuses to be known because knowing would reduce it to a thing. Maybe the universe avoids definition because it would rather be experienced than explained. So, the next time you reach for truth and feel it vanish, pause. Feel that space where answers used to live. The blind spot isn't empty. It's the source. And what lives there isn't an explanation. It's you, the questioner, the seeker, the very awareness that proves something exists, even when nothing can be proven. You're not meant to find it. You're meant to be it. And that's enough. Thought isn't a process. You sit quietly, and a thought arises. You imagine it builds itself, piece by piece, a beginning, a middle, an end. Like a wave rising from still water, reaching its crest, then falling. But look closer. Did you build that thought? Or did it arrive already shaped, dressed in meaning, delivered as a completed package? What if thinking is not a process at all? What if thought doesn't unfold in time, but pretends to? This is the paradox of thought isn't a process. The idea that what we call thinking is not a flow of parts, but a sudden, total appearance masquerading as motion. That the belief in step-by-step reasoning is just a mental animation, a post hoc justification to make the unexplainable feel sequential, linear, safe. Because your thoughts are not typed out like words on a page. They don't arrive one syllable at a time. You don't build them brick by brick. You just have them, fully formed, instant. Often before you're even aware. You hear them only after they are already there. And the illusion of process? That's your mind reverse engineering itself, drawing footprints after the traveler has already passed. Neurologically, it checks out. Brain scans reveal that the decision to act is made before we are consciously aware of deciding. Thought erupts, then awareness catches up, fabricating a timeline. You think you're creating the thought, but what you're really doing is narrating its arrival. You are the storyteller, not the sculptor. Your brain feeds you completed content, and your ego plays editor, pretending it participated. You believe, I reasoned through this, when what really happened is, a conclusion emerged, and your awareness raced backward, filling in the logic to make it feel deliberate. And what about complex thinking? The kind that unfolds across time, math problems, arguments, deep reflection. Surely that's a process? Not quite. What you're experiencing there is chains of instant recognitions, stitched together by memory. Each link in the chain is still whole, still complete, still born in a flash. The sensation of moving through ideas is just that, a sensation, a narrative, a sense of continuity projected across a sequence of frozen insights. Time is not how thought works. It's how thought feels, because your mind exists outside of linear time. Thoughts happen in consciousness, which has no clock. They emerge in flashes, like frames in a film, each complete, each eternal. And it is only when they are strung together by memory and attention that they feel like a river. But the river is an illusion. What you're actually riding is a strobe light in darkness. Bursts. Gaps. Imagined flow. And this changes everything. If thought isn't a process, then effort isn't what generates insight. Space is. Stillness is. Openness is. Great ideas come not from building, but from receiving, from clearing the clutter so a full thought can appear, not from stacking fragments until it grows. It also means you are not in control the way you think, because you don't choose your thoughts. You witness them. You watch as they appear from nowhere, then pretend you built them. You cling to ownership. I came up with that. But did you? Or did it just arrive, uninvited but perfect, like a message slid under your door? This is why the greatest minds, artists, mystics, scientists, all describe their insights the same way, as arrivals. Sudden, mysterious, timeless, not constructed but revealed, not calculated but downloaded. They don't describe a process, they describe a gift. And what does that mean for you? It means you can stop forcing it. Stop grinding your mind like a machine hoping it will spit out truth. It doesn't work that way. The more you press, the more static you create. The more you push, the longer the silence. Because thought doesn't obey pressure. It emerges in clarity, in space, in surrender. It also means that what you call thinking might not be thinking at all. Maybe it's just replay, rumination, the looping of already formed ideas trying to convince you they're fresh. True thought, the kind that reveals something new, doesn't loop. It appears. Like lightning in a dark sky. Instant. Unmistakable. So what then is your role? To clear the interference. To notice the thought before you dress it in history. To catch it in the raw before memory strings it into a lie of sequence. To be the watcher, not the writer. To remember that awareness is not the author of thought, but the stage where it appears. And once you see that, you stop mistaking motion for creation. You stop needing to build your mind. You realize it's already built. That every idea is born in wholeness. That your job is not to construct thought, but to recognize it. To stand in the stillness long enough for the thought to arrive, not from time, but from silence. Because time is not the womb of thought. It is its costume, and you are the space beneath it all, timeless, waiting, and already complete. Perception is self-generated static. You open your eyes and think you're seeing the world, the chair, the wall, the sky. You think it's all just there, outside of you, waiting to be observed. But what if that's a trick? What if what you're seeing isn't the world at all, but a simulation inside your skull? Not a camera feed, not a mirror, a rendering. A hallucination so stable you forgot it's a guess. What if everything you see, touch, hear, believe is just self-generated static, organized into color and shape by a mind desperate for order? Because the truth is brutal. Perception isn't a window. It's a broadcast. Neuroscience tells us that your brain receives raw, chaotic data from your senses. Light waves, pressure patterns, chemical traces. But that data is meaningless on its own. It's just noise. It doesn't say apple or friend or threat. It doesn't come labeled. Your brain has to interpret it, reconstruct it, fabricate it into something coherent. What you call reality is just your brain filtering, translating, and assembling guesses into a usable model. And that model isn't what's out there. It's what's in here. You don't see objects, you see internal predictions of objects. Your visual cortex constructs the world milliseconds before you're aware of it. Your perception of the now is actually the past, buffered, polished, and presented like a live feed. But it's not live. It's rendered, like a video game that only loads the scene you're looking at. Not because the rest doesn't exist, but because your mind doesn't bother with what you're not watching. Take the blind spot in your vision. There's a literal hole in what your eyes can see. But do you notice it? No. Your brain fills it in, seamlessly. You're seeing something that isn't there, and you trust it without question or consider dreams. When you dream, you fully believe in the scene, the people, the logic, the texture of the ground beneath your feet. It feels real. It looks real. Until you wake and realize the entire world you inhabited was synthesized by your own mind, without a single atom of external input. Now ask yourself, if your brain can generate a whole universe at night, why do you think it stops during the day? Because it doesn't. It just syncs that dream with external data, like tuning static into a station. That's perception, aligning internal hallucination with sensory feedback. And when the sync is strong, we call it reality. But when it slips, when the brain drifts from the incoming signal, we call it madness, illusion, or imagination. But the mechanism is the same. This is why optical illusions work, why magic tricks fool us, why memories shift. Because what you're experiencing isn't reality. It's your brain's model of reality. And that model is biased, incomplete, and deeply shaped by your mood, your attention, your culture, your expectations. You don't perceive the world. You simulate it. And the most terrifying implication, when no one watches, nothing renders. Not metaphorically, literally. In quantum physics, observation changes outcomes. A particle remains in a probabilistic cloud, neither here nor there, until it's measured. Then, and only then, it takes a position. Reality collapses into form when it's observed, and without the observer, there is no form. Only potential. Now, apply that to perception. If your brain doesn't predict or attend to something, it might as well not exist. Your visual field doesn't include the backs of your ears or the micro movements of the air around you, not because they're not there, but because they're not rendered. Your brain saves bandwidth by creating only what it thinks matters. You are living in a conservation simulation, a shortcut model, a static to sensation engine, and what you call real is just the part that made it through the filter. So what does that mean for truth? It means truth is bigger than what you perceive, that the world behind the rendering might be nothing like the picture your mind creates, that the forest doesn't sound the same when no one is there, that color isn't color until light hits an eye, that meaning doesn't exist until someone perceives a pattern in the noise. This isn't just philosophy, it's function. Perception isn't a mirror. It's a story told after the fact. You see the lightning after it's already struck. You hear the sound after your brain has removed the echo. You move your hand, and your sense of control is spliced after the motor signal has already fired. Your conscious experience is a lagging translation of electrical storms you don't command, and yet, you believe it completely. You believe in the solidity of objects, in the distance between walls, in the continuity of identity. You believe the world is stable just because your brain keeps the illusion stitched together, like a film reel projected fast enough that you forget each frame is separate, each thought, its own rendering, each moment, a compression artifact. But if you pause, if you truly pause, and ask, what am I actually seeing right now? You'll feel the simulation stutter. The color you see, it's not on the wall, it's in your brain. The shape you recognize, it's not out there, it's a match to memory. The time you feel passing, it's not universal, it's generated. And suddenly the world gets quieter, less solid, more strange. Because the deeper you look, the less you find. No object, just energy, no boundary, just movement, no self, just rendering. So, what's real? Maybe the static is, the raw signal, the chaos before translation. Everything else, this world of walls, faces, names, ideas, is just the mind painting order over noise. And maybe, when the painting stops, the silence you hear isn't emptiness, it's the universe, before you rendered it. Observation deletes, then what was there? You think looking is harmless. That to observe is to witness, to understand, to clarify. But in the quantum world, observation isn't passive, it's violent. It doesn't just reveal what's there, it changes it, collapses it, deletes everything it could have been, and leaves only one narrow outcome behind. That's the terror buried inside physics. To observe something is to destroy every version that it could have been. The double-slit experiment made this undeniable. A particle moves like a wave, spreading across all possibilities until you look. And the moment you do, it snaps. No more wave, no more potential. It becomes a dot, a thing, a choice. You didn't just find the truth, you forced it. You killed every other outcome that might have happened. And here's the question that keeps scientists and philosophers awake. What if all of reality is like this? What if your attention is not neutral, but a blade? Because every time you observe, you collapse. Every time you focus, you interfere. You eliminate the might-have-beens in favor of what you see. Observation becomes authorship, not just a way of noticing the world, but a way of deciding which version survives. That's not awareness, that's execution. Think about this deeper. Before you looked, the system could have gone 1,000 ways. It was infinite, undefined, probable, alive. And then you came. With your attention, your curiosity, your gaze, and everything else vanished. Possibility turned into singularity. And that singularity, what you call reality, is just the one thread you happen to slice into existence. What happens to the rest? They're not stored. They're not waiting. They're gone. Like a dream forgotten the second you wake up. Like a hallway full of doors you never opened, and now, never will. You didn't choose this outcome consciously, but your observation did. That's how fragile the universe is, how slippery. You don't just live in a world of objects, you live in a fog of probabilities. And the moment you pay attention to one part of that fog, it crystallizes, it becomes. And everything else, every subtle whisper of what could have been, is obliterated. Because you looked. And here's where it becomes personal. What if this isn't just true of particles? What if it's true of people? What if every time you judge someone, label them, interpret them, define them, you collapse their wave function, you fix them in place, freeze them into the version your mind has chosen, not because it's true, but because you look that way. You erase the complexity, the mystery, the versions of them you'll never meet because you decided, with your gaze, who they are. And what if the same thing happens inside you? You define yourself. You say, I'm this. I'm not that. This is who I am. But what if those labels, those thoughts, those acts of self-observation are pruning shears, cutting off the parts of you that could have grown, that were growing, but died under your spotlight? Every thought you repeat becomes a fix. Every judgment you hold becomes an anchor. Every certainty becomes a tombstone for a version of you that might have thrived. Observation deletes. And you've been deleting yourself every day. This isn't metaphor. This is physics. In the quantum world, nothing exists with certainty until it's observed. Everything lives in a blur, a superposition, until something forces it into clarity, into limitation, into one version. The observer isn't a bystander. The observer is the executioner of possibility. Now look around you. The people you think you know, the habits you repeat, the world you believe is real. It's all just one path through an infinite field of might-have-beens, a narrow thread in a web of collapsed potentials. And every time you look, really look, you close more doors. You are not just seeing reality, you're sculpting it by erasing the rest. So what now? Do you stop observing? No, but you soften your gaze. You loosen your definitions. You question your certainty. You approach the world not as a map of facts, but as a sea of possibilities. And when you must observe, observe gently. With curiosity, not conquest. With wonder, not judgment. Because what you look at dies into the version you create. And if you must kill possibilities with your attention, let it at least be done with reverence. Because in a quantum world, every act of observation is a funeral, and every reality you see is one of countless ghosts you'll never meet. The future keeps looping back. You think you're walking forward. That time is a line. That the past is behind you, the present is where you stand, and the future is something ahead. Unknown, unshaped, waiting. But what if that's just how it feels? What if the future isn't something you move toward, but something that already exists, pulling you in? You imagine choice, progress, change. But your life has a pattern, doesn't it? The same thoughts, the same feelings, the same cycles dressed in different days. You leave one place only to find another that feels eerily similar. You end a relationship and find the next one echoes the last. You quit the job, change cities, burn the past, and still wake up with the same questions gnawing at you. So ask yourself, what if time isn't unfolding? What if it's looping? Not in circles you can see, but in spirals, repetitions with slight distortions, echoes bending through your timeline. You think you're evolving, but maybe you're just being rewound. Played again. Another iteration. Another attempt. Now, here's the unsettling part. What if the future isn't ahead of you at all? What if it's behind you, like gravity, a force not pushing you forward, but pulling you backward, into itself, like a magnet, like a script, a fixed image so powerful it drags every moment toward it, and you, thinking you're walking toward the unknown, are just a shadow being summoned into shape. You've felt this before, the déjà vu, the strange familiarity with moments you've never lived, the way some dreams seem like memories instead of imagination, the way an idea strikes you with the weight of inevitability. I was always going to do this. But if that's true, who made that decision? Was it your will? Or was it a future that already knew you'd arrive? Physics gives this idea a name, block universe theory, the notion that time is not a river flowing, but a landscape. Every moment, past, present, future, already exists. All of it, fixed, permanent. You don't travel through time. You experience slices of it, like a needle tracing a groove in a record, and you call that the present. But the record was already pressed. So then, what is free will? If the future is fixed, are you just performing your role, thinking it's spontaneous? Or is there still choice hidden somewhere in how you respond to the loop? Here's the eerie part. Maybe the loop is not a prison. Maybe it's a mirror. It repeats because there's something you're meant to notice, some truth you missed, some pattern you haven't broken. Until you see it, the future keeps looping back, dragging you into itself. Not as punishment, but as instruction. Think about the paths you almost took, the person you almost became, the version of you that still haunts you in daydreams. What if those aren't lost possibilities? What if they're echoes, fragments from other loops? What if the future isn't pulling you towards something new, but towards something ancient, something you've forgotten how to remember? There's a reason some people feel born with purpose, with obsession, with strange clarity, as if they're being played, as if a distant note is calling them, pulling them into tune with a rhythm they can't explain. So maybe the future isn't the next thing. Maybe it's the original thing, the source, not the destination. The spark that sent your story backward in time just to see if, this time, you'd recognize it. And here you are, still dreaming, still repeating, still calling it progress. But what if the only way forward is to turn around? To stop racing into the illusion of what's next, and instead ask, what's pulling me? Because until you do, the future keeps looping back, not to haunt you, but to remake you again and again and again. Existence requires its own forgetting. You are alive, but you don't truly know it. Not fully, not constantly. You breathe, move, decide, react, without pausing to question the miracle of any of it. And that's not a flaw. That's the requirement. Because existence, raw, self-aware, unobscured, can't bear its own weight. To survive, you must forget you exist. This is not philosophy. It's biology. It's neurology. It's the price of motion. Because pure awareness, if it ever fully emerged without filter or distraction, would paralyze you. Think about it. If at every moment you were fully aware that you are a living being, floating on a rock in an infinite black void, built from atoms that don't really touch, with a brain constantly translating electric chaos into meaning, you wouldn't move. You'd stop. You'd stare. You'd collapse into the weight of it. Awareness, when fully exposed, is too heavy to carry. And so evolution, with eerie wisdom, gave you a veil. It let you forget. Let you think that the coffee cup is just a coffee cup, not a galaxy of particles. Let you believe that your thoughts are yours, not emergent echoes of culture, trauma, instinct, and history. Let you walk across a room without realizing you're steering a machine made of stardust. Because if you really saw it, every time, you'd fall to your knees. Existence requires its own forgetting, so you can function, so you can move, so you don't get trapped in awe. This is why babies stare into space, why mystics go silent, why psychedelics can bring beauty and terror in equal measure. Because they lift the veil. They show the thing you usually don't see, that life is a lucid dream wearing a mask of normalcy, that your name, your goals, your habits are scaffolding, useful, necessary, but not real. And when that scaffolding slips, even for a moment, you remember. You remember that being conscious is not natural, it's miraculous. But the miracle must stay hidden for the machine to run. Think about your heart. It beats whether you notice or not. But try noticing every beat. Try remembering with each pulse that death is only one skipped rhythm away. You can't live that way. Not for long. The body survives by keeping that truth in the background, just like the mind survives by burying awareness beneath routines, rituals, distractions. You build a self to forget the self. You talk to avoid silence. You plan to avoid the present. You believe in linear time so you don't dissolve into the endless now, because in that endless now, you disappear. And yet, part of you longs for it. That quiet hum underneath life. That haunting feeling in empty rooms, starlit skies, long walks alone. It's the echo of the thing you forgot. Not by accident, but by necessity. It's the memory of awareness itself. And every so often, it breaks through. You stop scrolling, you feel your breath. You remember that you are here and alive and temporary. And in that instant, reality holds you. Then, lets you go. Because if it held you too long, you'd stop playing the game. You'd stop pretending you were just a role. And the game needs players. The world needs forgetting. And you need to believe that this is all normal. So you can keep going. But let this haunt you. In a good way. Existence is not banal, it is unspeakable. And you are here not because you understand it, but because you don't. And in your not knowing, you move, you laugh, you suffer, you reach, you love. And all of it, is made possible because the deeper truth is buried, so that the dance can go on, so that you can live a story, even if it's not real, so that you can forget. Just long enough to become. And maybe, when it's time, when your story ends, the forgetting ends too, and the awareness returns, not to freeze you, but to welcome you back, into the thing you always were, and never really left. You're the story's ending first. ChatGPT said, you believe your life is a story unfolding in time, that you were born and from that moment onward began writing your tale. Page 1, chapter by chapter. Trial, choice, transformation. You see yourself as the hero in motion, shaping the ending with every step you take. But what if that's a lie? What if you were never the beginning? What if you're the ending, disguised as a journey? This is the haunting riddle of you're the story's ending first. A paradox that turns your sense of self inside out, because the life you think you're building may not be progressing toward a destination. It may be echoing backward from one. Imagine this. You are not a narrative unfolding forward. You are the resolution of a story that's already over. Your thoughts, your fears, your relationships, none of them aimless. All of them shaped like footprints left behind by something that already happened. You were born, yes, but not to create an ending. You were born to mirror one. That final sentence defines everything that came before. It retroactively reshapes the meaning of the plot. It casts a shadow backward across every choice, every scene, every word. Now imagine you are that sentence, and the life you live is the echo of it, a narrative unraveling in reverse, disguising the truth, that the outcome came first. This isn't metaphor, it's structure. In some interpretations of physics and time, especially the block universe and retrocausality theories, the future can shape the past. Effects ripple backward. What will happen determines what must happen. In this frame, your destiny isn't ahead, it's beneath you, like a sculptor carving from underneath the marble, unseen. And that sculptor might be you, not the version of you that walks and breathes and wonders, but the version that has already completed the journey, already chosen, already ended. You, from the last page, sending signals back to the first. You, as the outcome, pulling your own steps toward itself, not through free will, but through gravitational meaning. That's why you sometimes feel like you're remembering things you haven't lived. That's why certain places feel scripted. That's why you sense fate, even though you say you don't believe in it. You are fate, wearing the mask of agency. You are conclusion, pretending to begin. And what's more, your life's meaning doesn't accumulate over time. It radiates backward from the final frame. Every moment you live has been soaked in the essence of that ending, like ink bleeding through paper. That heartbreak, designed to crack you in the exact way required. That triumph, timed to ripple backward, giving shape to all your waiting. That silence, that voice, that accident, they aren't noise. They're echoes of a destination that already exists. And you? You are walking backward through it, thinking you are going forward. This is why you feel déjà vu. Why certain people feel inevitable. Why some choices feel like they were made for you before you even arrived at them. Not because you lack free will, but because your free will operates within a script whispered from the end. It's also why your memories don't align with time. You remember meaning, not sequence. You remember significance, not chronology. Because deep down, you are wired to chase the ending you already are. And when you resist it, when you try to write a different story, you feel the tension. Not because you're doing something wrong, but because you're tugging against a pattern that was already formed. A shape that you are, whether you recognize it or not. So what does this mean for how you live? It means the most important question isn't, where am I going, but what am I returning to? It means your instincts matter more than your plans. Your recognition matters more than your logic. You aren't building meaning, you're uncovering it. It means the people who feel destined probably are. The endings that feel like beginnings probably are. The paths you can't explain but feel compelled to follow. Maybe you're not walking toward your truth. Maybe you're walking from it, in reverse, in disguise. And maybe that's what déjà vu really is. Not a glitch, not a loop, but the flicker of recognition. I've already ended. And I've been here before. This isn't hopelessness, this is power. Because once you know you're the ending first, you stop fearing collapse. You stop panicking over mistakes. You begin to see every detour as a necessary spiral. Every delay as choreography. Every heartbreak as a precisely placed fracture required for the shape you already became. You stop trying to become and start trying to remember. You let the ending speak. You stop screaming over it with goals and timelines and maps. You listen. And when you do, the world doesn't become less mysterious. It becomes more. You hear yourself before you exist. You see patterns before you understand. You feel meaning before it forms, because you are the last word of a sentence trying to remember its first breath. And when you finally arrive at the end of your life, you will not say, I made it. You will say, of course, because you've been echoing this whole time. Awareness moves backwards. You wake up and think you're moving forward, through time, through experience, through the story of your life. You remember the past, anticipate the future, and assume consciousness is the light traveling with you, projecting outward like a beam. But what if that's wrong? What if awareness doesn't move forward at all? What if consciousness moves backwards? Not through time like a traveler, but through consequence like an archaeologist? What if the you who is experiencing this moment is not creating the present, but unraveling it from a thread that's already been spun? You think memory is something behind you, but what if it's the trail of where consciousness has just arrived? Picture this. You're watching a movie, but you're arriving at each scene in reverse, understanding motives only after the consequences unfold, rebuilding cause from effect. Your mind stitches together a narrative and calls it continuity. But what if that continuity is an illusion born from decoding, not from creating? What if awareness doesn't guide time, but rather interprets it in retrograde? We're taught to believe in linear flow. That time moves forward, and we ride that current like passengers. But physics doesn't confirm this. At the deepest level, the quantum level, the laws of physics are time-symmetric. They don't care which way the arrow points. Cause and effect can, under certain interpretations, flip. And in many equations, time is reversible. But the mind insists on direction, on past then present then future. Why? Because maybe consciousness itself needs directionality to function. Maybe it's not that time flows forward and we follow, but that we are reconstructing reality from what already exists, like a puzzle being assembled backwards. Think of how memory works. You don't remember everything. You remember what matters. Your mind reconstructs the path that led to now, but you don't recall the full film. Only the edited version, backward stitched to make sense. Your awareness is constantly asking, how did I get here? And then it fills in the blanks, not with perfect records, but with explanations that feel like truth. This isn't just theoretical. Neuroscience shows that your brain begins preparing actions before you're aware of deciding. Studies by Libet and others demonstrate that the conscious experience of I chose is post-dictive. The body moves, and milliseconds later, the awareness catches up and says, I meant to do that. You're not authoring the moment, you're narrating it after the fact. So, if the conscious self isn't pulling reality forward, what is it doing? It's decoding, rewinding, peeling back the layers of experience like reverse erosion. You are not the spark at the front of time. You are the echo unraveling its residue. This makes sense of déjà vu, of dreams that predict, of hunches that arrive fully formed. Maybe these aren't peeks into the future. Maybe they're fragments from a consciousness that's moving backward and catching glimpses of what has already happened, just not fully unpacked yet. What if intuition is not foresight, but hindsight bleeding through the veil? And if awareness is receding, sliding through existence in reverse, then your entire life isn't a path to a destination. It's a spiral through an unfolding collapse. You aren't building the story. You're discovering it. Your choices may not shape the world. They may simply reveal the shape already beneath the surface. It's like carving a statue, not by adding, but by removing stone. You're not progressing forward. You're unearthing the final form of something that has already been written. And your now is just the point your awareness has reached in that excavation. The implications are massive. What if every first feeling is really the last layer being exposed? What if love doesn't grow? It's uncovered. What if death isn't the end, but the beginning of the awareness trail, the first unraveling from the final knot? And maybe that's why life feels like remembering, not inventing. Why grief feels like recognition. Why meaning is found in reverse. Only when something is lost do we see its full shape. Because awareness doesn't light the way ahead. It illuminates the wreckage left behind. This flips everything. You're not moving into the unknown. You're rediscovering the known from the other side. Consciousness is not a spotlight into darkness. It's a mirror walking backwards through a hallway, reflecting what's just been passed. Never quite sure what's behind, only what's already imprinted in the frame. It explains why we struggle with the present, why it always slips away. Because the present isn't where consciousness lives, it's where it passes. You don't experience now. You experience the interpretation of what just happened, always half a step behind, always chasing the fading imprint of the moment as it unravels. And if this is true, if consciousness is receding, not progressing, then there is no such thing as control in the way we thought. There is only discovery, revelation. Watching the ink emerge on a page that's already been written, reading your story backwards and calling it growth. So, the next time you think you're making a choice, pause. Ask yourself, Am I choosing, or am I uncovering the decision that was already there, waiting for me to arrive? You may find that the answer doesn't come ahead of you, it echoes from behind. Exactly 5,195 characters. Sleep is proof of nothing. You lie down. The room dims, your eyes close, your thoughts scatter, slow, dissolve, and then nothing. Hours pass. The world moves on without you. And when you wake, you don't ask where you went. You don't demand an explanation. You just blink, stretch, and carry on. As if those lost hours never mattered. But they should. Because for a third of your life, you disappear. Not metaphorically, not spiritually, literally. And somehow, you accept this vanishing without question. That's the quiet horror of sleep. It's proof of nothing. And yet you surrender to it like it means everything. No alarms go off in your mind. No part of you screams in protest at this nightly annihilation. You don't fear the nothingness. You welcome it. In fact, if you don't get enough of it, you start to fall apart. But what exactly are you welcoming? Where do you go? You're not dreaming for all of it. REM sleep is just a fraction. The rest is blankness. No sights, no sounds, no thoughts, no you. Your body lies there. Your brain hums quietly. But the self, the observer, the narrator, the one who says, I am, is gone. And yet, when morning comes, you just reboot and keep going. But pause and ask, what other moment in your day-to-day life would you allow yourself to not exist for hours, without explanation, without memory, without fear? What other experience do you undergo daily where your sense of identity, continuity, awareness, everything that makes you you, disappears and you don't even flinch? This should shake you, because you vanish every night, and no part of your mind is bothered. Is that peace, or is it programming? Maybe it's not that sleep is peaceful. Maybe it's that you've been conditioned to surrender to this oblivion, because if you questioned it, and truly questioned it, it would break something too deep to repair. Because the truth is, sleep proves nothing. It doesn't prove you exist. It doesn't prove continuity. It doesn't even prove that the you who wakes up is the same one who fell asleep. You close your eyes as one version of yourself, with one set of memories, one sense of time, and you wake as another, similar, familiar, but unprovably identical. There is no surveillance of the gap, no witness to the transition. You are absent, and you trust, blindly, that whatever returns in the morning is still you. That's not logic, that's faith. And we call it normal. We joke about needing our 8 hours like it's routine maintenance. But maintenance of what exactly? A body that can survive without you, a brain that runs simulations without an observer. You don't sleep like a paused machine, you sleep like a vanishing act. So then, what is the self? If it can disappear so easily, so often, and return without resistance, is it even real? Or is it a hallucination that flickers in and out, like a signal trying to hold connection across dimensions of awareness? Because if you can go missing for hours, and everything still functions, then who are you, really? What if sleep is the default state? What if this waking world, this steady stream of thought, is the glitch? Maybe sleep is the reminder that you're not as solid as you believe, that your grip on consciousness is temporary, fragile, unnecessary, and your mind knows it. That's why it doesn't resist. Because somewhere inside, it remembers that you are not essential, that you is just a brief flicker between two darknesses. You think you live a continuous life, but you don't. You live in episodes, in bursts of selfhood that blink in and out between stretches of nothing, and that nothing is where you came from, and that nothing is where you return to, every single night. So maybe sleep isn't rest, maybe it's rehearsal. For the moment, you vanish and never return. And the terrifying thing is, you've already made peace with it. You just call it sleep. Perceiving cancels what exists. You open your eyes and think you're seeing the world. You think light enters, bounces off surfaces, flows into your mind, and builds truth. You think that to observe something is to witness what's already there. But what if it isn't? What if perception doesn't reveal reality? What if it replaces it? There's a deep, quiet terror in this idea, that every time you look at something, you're destroying what it was a moment before. Not maliciously, not even consciously, but inevitably. Because perception doesn't just detect, it alters, it collapses. In quantum physics, this is not metaphor. It's the observer effect. A particle exists in many states, wave, position, spin, until it's measured. But the act of observing collapses the possibilities into a single outcome, as if the universe must choose a version of itself to show you. And in that moment, every other version dies. So what does that mean for the world you think you see? That chair, that face, that color, that room, the moment your gaze lands, the moment your mind knows what it is, that object isn't what it was before you looked. Your brain has now shaped it, labeled it, simplified it, erased every version it could have been that didn't match your expectation. You think perception is passive, but your attention is a weapon. It edits, it filters, it renders. It doesn't just record reality, it writes over it. You stare at a stranger. They look back. Now their posture changes, their breath shifts, their facial muscles contract. They are now a different person than they were a moment ago, because they were seen, because your gaze reached into their nervous system and changed them. You didn't observe them, you transformed them. And not just people, places, memories, the past itself. Every time you remember, you reshape. Every time you reflect, you reinforce. Your mind reconstructs the moment, but slightly altered, slightly biased, until the act of remembering is less like replaying a tape and more like redrawing it by hand. So now ask, if everything I perceive becomes something else the moment I notice it, then what's left unobserved? What exists outside your mind's reach, outside your categories, outside the filters of language, identity, expectation? The problem is, you'll never know. Because the moment you try to know, the act of trying infects the truth. Even your question leaves fingerprints. Even your curiosity leaves collapse in its wake. There may be a version of the world, untouched, raw, unsimplified, but it exists only in the dark, in the space before thought, in the breath before naming, in the gap between awareness and grasping. You've never seen it. No one has, because the instant we look, we lose it. This is not failure, it's structure, it's how minds work. They're not open windows to truth. They're mirrors that shine light into the world and mistake the reflection for reality. So what do you really see? You see what your brain lets you, what it edits for speed, what it translates for safety, what it simplifies for survival. And in that act, what you call truth is more like a hallucination agreed upon. By neurons, by culture, by habit. Not wrong, but incomplete. A flattened version of something far more wild, more shifting, more alive than you'll ever be able to hold still. So maybe the deepest truth is this. You never see reality. You only see your relationship to it. And every time you look, you break the very thing you wish to understand. Not out of malice, but because the universe doesn't let you observe without consequence. It doesn't want to be known. It wants to be lived. And maybe the only part of reality that remains untouched is the part you never see. You can't know you exist. ChatGPT said, you're certain you exist. You feel it. In your breath, in your thoughts, in the way the world pushes back when you move through it. I am, you say. You don't question it. How could you? You're the one asking the question. You feel pain, and so you must be. You observe, and so you must be the observer. You think, and so, surely, you must be real. But what if that certainty is just a trick? What if your self is both the witness and the forger of every piece of evidence you use to prove you're here? This is the paradox. You can't know you exist, because any proof of your existence is generated by the thing in question. You wouldn't trust a suspect who wrote their own alibi. You wouldn't trust a map that drew itself. And yet, you trust the mind that tells you it's real. You trust the loop. But a loop doesn't prove a source. It only confirms itself. And that's what your sense of identity is. Recursion. A snake eating its own tail. A program that verifies itself by pointing to its own output. You think, I'm real, but who thought that? You did. And what proves you exist? That you had the thought. That's not a conclusion. That's a circle. And yet, you feel it. The center. The watcher behind your eyes. The voice that says, this is me. But have you ever found it? Tried, meditated, reflected, peeled back every layer. And what do you find? Sensations, thoughts, memories, roles, habits, none of them quite you. You can remove each one and still feel something remains, But the moment you look directly at that something, it disappears, like trying to see your own eyeball without a mirror, like trying to touch a hand with itself. The self resists observation because it is made of observation. It's not an object, it's a function. And functions don't exist the way objects do. They aren't things, they are processes. You don't have a self. You do a self. Continuously. Like a flame that stays lit only by burning. And yet, this doesn't feel like absence. It feels intimate. But maybe that's the design. Maybe your sense of self is not proof of existence, but a protective illusion. A hallucinated anchor to keep you sane in the ocean of chaos. The self isn't a destination, it's a stabilizer. A lens built not to find truth, but to function. Because here's the terrifying truth. The only thing that proves your existence is you. Your experience is self-contained. You don't know anyone else is. Only that they behave in ways you interpret as consciousness. You can't feel their thoughts, you can't verify their being, and they can't verify yours. You are a closed loop. Self-referencing. Self-authenticating. A sealed chamber of awareness that cannot step outside itself to check if it's truly there. And that means your self might not be real. Not in the way you assume. It might be an emergent simulation, a user interface evolved to mask the messy machinery underneath. Your thoughts aren't you. They arise. Your emotions aren't you. They flood and vanish. Your choices aren't even purely yours. They're shaped by neurons, patterns, histories you didn't choose. So what is you? That voice asking the question? Or the silence before the voice appeared? And if you can't find the self, if all you can find is a process that keeps pointing to itself, then you haven't proven existence. You've only proven recursion. You can't know you exist. You can only assume it. And assumptions are not evidence. They are survival tools. Helpful. Necessary. But not true in any deep way. This is the core of the existential glitch. To verify the self must already exist. But if that existence is unverifiable, then your entire reality becomes a hall of mirrors. You touch a thought, and it turns to mist. You chase a truth, and it becomes another question. You seek a center, and all you find is movement. And yet, you are moved by love, by fear, by longing. So maybe the point was never to prove you exist. Maybe it's to feel it, to dance inside the illusion long enough to taste its beauty, to whisper into the loop, not for answers, but for resonance. Because even if you can't know you exist, you can feel what it's like to try. And maybe that's the closest you'll ever get to truth. Not knowledge, not certainty, but the ache of the question itself. The universe doesn't need meaning. You open your eyes and ask, why am I here? You look at the stars and ask, what does it all mean? You suffer and you demand a reason. You love and you insist it matters. But the truth is colder than most can bear. The universe doesn't need meaning. It never asked for it. It never contained it. It never once required a single whisper of why. Everything you see, from galaxies spinning to cells dividing, operates perfectly, relentlessly, blindly, without purpose. Not in the poetic sense, not in the moral sense, not in any sense at all. The laws of physics don't care. They just are. Your lungs breathe without asking to. Your heart beats with no reason beyond momentum. Planets don't orbit because of love. Fire doesn't burn because it hates. It all just happens, without reflection, without intent, without narrative. So, where did meaning come from? From you. From the human brain. A pattern-seeking, story-craving organ that cannot stand the idea of silence. A machine designed not just to survive, but to explain its survival. And when it found no answers in the sky, it invented them. Gods, myths, missions, philosophies. It built scaffolding to hang its fear on. It called the randomness destiny. It named the chaos sacred. It stuffed silence with symbols until it sounded like purpose. But remove the mind, and meaning disappears. Rocks don't ponder their purpose. Tides don't weep over lost moons. Stars are not proud of their light. Meaning is not in the universe. It's in the mirror. And that's the terrifying part. Because if it's not out there, then nothing is waiting to validate you. No divine checklist, no secret message, no final judge to confirm whether your suffering was noble, or your victories were real. The universe isn't watching. It isn't testing you. It isn't teaching you. It is ignoring you. And for many, that's unbearable. So they rush to fill the silence with belief, with legacy, with ritual, with obsession. Because silence, to the untrained mind, sounds like death. But to the still mind, it sounds like truth. The truth is that you exist not because the universe had a plan, but because it didn't. You are not a sentence with an ending. You are a glitch in entropy, a temporary vibration in an unfeeling ocean of law. And still, you ache to matter. You write poetry. You chase connection. You cry when you lose what you love. You scream when the void stares back too long. You are a meaning-making machine trapped in a world that doesn't need meaning. And that conflict is the core of the human condition. But here's the strange liberation. If the universe doesn't need meaning, then you're free. Free to stop pretending every pain must teach you something. Free to stop waiting for signs. Free to create joy that isn't justified. Free to live a life that doesn't matter to the stars, but matters to you. Because if nothing means anything, then anything can mean everything. You choose. You sculpt meaning like a potter shaping clay out of void. You pour yourself into the silence, not to fill it, but to dance with it. Not because it asked you to, but because you can. And maybe that's the only meaning that ever mattered. The meaning you made in a meaningless world. The fire you built in the cold. The echo you screamed into space, knowing no one would answer, but singing anyway. 29, you are not. Because the universe said so, not because fate declared it, but because this moment blinked into existence, and you had the courage to notice it. You are a replayed frame. You blink, you breathe, you reach for a thought and call it yours. You feel like you're moving through time, moment by moment, scene by scene, alive, aware, in motion. But what if you're not? What if this moment, this thought, this very breath has already happened? Not once, but always. What if your consciousness right now is not a live stream, but a replayed frame, a snapshot in an infinite loop, flickering endlessly in a cosmos that never moves forward? You are not progressing. You are being recalled. This isn't poetic metaphor. It's a brutal, unblinking proposition that your life isn't unfolding, it's looping. That your consciousness isn't the tip of time's arrow. It's a single frame being replayed in an infinite reel. Everything you feel, think, suffer, love. It has already occurred and will occur again, exactly the same, forever. You aren't experiencing life. You're a ghost of experience, projected across a timeless void. Think of film. A movie feels alive when it plays, but it's just frame after frame, flickering fast enough to simulate movement. Pause it, and each frame is still, static, self-contained. That's what you are, one static frame, complete in itself, unaware of its stillness because it's surrounded by the illusion of time. Your memory tells you otherwise. It says, no, I was just there. I came from the past. I'm going somewhere. But memory is not proof of time. Memory is part of the frame. It's embedded in the illusion, just another echo inside the replay. You remember because you were written to remember. Your sense of continuity is a feature of the frame, not evidence of flow. This is what it means to be a replayed frame, not stuck, not broken, just eternal. The idea isn't new. Nietzsche called it eternal recurrence, the thought that the universe and everything in it repeats forever in exactly the same sequence. Every joy, every betrayal, every whisper, over and over, in endless repetition. But today, physics offers strange echoes of this idea. In cosmology, some theories propose that the universe may be cyclical, that after every death, big freeze, big crunch, big rip, it all resets. And when it resets exactly. Not metaphorically, literally. Everything, including you, loops. Not because time moves in circles, but because the pattern is the only one that can exist. All possibilities already are, and only those that fit into self-consistent loops survive. You are one of them. But here's the catch. The frame doesn't know it's a loop. It feels like the first time, every time. That's the design. You wake up, feel the sunlight, fall in love, grieve, heal, believing it's the first. Believing the moment is alive. But it's not alive. It's remembered by the universe. in infinite clarity. You are not moving through your life. Your life is being played to you, and every time it plays, you feel like this is now, like this is new. It never is. Even your questions, why am I here? Is this real? Have been asked before, 1,000,000 times. In this exact breath, with this exact doubt, in this same moment you think is yours. This isn't your thought. It's the thought that belongs to this frame. You are not a soul in a body. You are a pixel in a loop. And yet, something inside you resists. It wants to believe in freedom, in forward movement, in the uniqueness of this day. It says, but I feel new. I feel awake. Of course you do. That's part of the replay. That's what this frame is. It contains that feeling, that realization, that spark. You're not wrong to feel it. You're just not the first. You're not the origin. You're the imprint. And when you sleep, this frame ends. But it doesn't vanish. It waits. It returns. Just like you always do. This might sound horrifying, to live in a loop, to know that nothing changes, that your tragedies and triumphs are stitched into the cosmic film strip, eternal and unyielding. But what if it's not horror? What if it's grace? Because in this loop, you're never truly lost. You are never erased. Your love, your pain, your kindness, they are not gone. They are not dust. They are part of the eternal sequence, preserved, remembered, replayed, always. You are not drifting into darkness. You are the remembered light. And if that's true, then perhaps the real illusion isn't the loop, but your need to escape it. You think you want freedom, but maybe what you really want is meaning. And in this repetition, there is profound meaning. You are the eternal witness to your own becoming. Not because you change, but because you are the change, relived, relit, replayed forever. You are not waiting for the next moment. You are the moment. And in this frame, right now, you are seen, you are known, you are exactly as you have always been, exactly as you always will be. You are not progressing, you are not failing. You are simply playing perfectly again. Death is an illusion of time. You believe you're moving forward, one moment to the next, one breath to the next. You are told there is a beginning, a middle, and an end. You're born. You live. You die. But what if that entire structure is an illusion? What if death doesn't actually happen? It only appears to happen because you are watching from inside a timeline your mind was trained to believe in. What if the ending you fear is nothing more than a trick of perception, a curtain drop on a stage that never actually closed? Time feels real. It ticks. It flows. It ages your body, turns days into years, separates moments into before and after. But that feeling, that steady march of moments, isn't built into the universe. It's built into your experience of it. Physics tells a different story. At the deepest levels of reality, time doesn't move the way you think it does. The equations that govern particles, energy, and even space-time itself are timeless, reversible. They don't know past or future. They don't require clocks. To them, all moments exist simultaneously, like pages in a book, already written. And if that's true, then what is death? You think of it as the final page, the lights out, the stop. But that assumption only makes sense if you believe that time flows like a river, and you are riding it toward a waterfall. But you're not. You're not moving through time. Time is moving through you. You are not a passenger. You are a coordinate. You exist, fully, completely, in one eternal slice of reality. And just because you perceive that slice in a sequence, doesn't mean that sequence is real. You're like a character in a film who thinks the movie is unfolding second by second. But outside that screen, the entire reel already exists. Every frame, every scene, already there. So when you die, when the body stops, the thoughts cease, the identity unravels, what really ends? Not the moment you were in. That moment still exists. It's still part of the fabric of reality. It didn't vanish. It didn't fall off the edge of the universe. It's there, just not here. You didn't go anywhere. You are still alive, in that moment, forever. And that idea destroys the concept of death. Because death assumes that your existence is a path that must conclude. But what if it's not a path at all? What if it's a position? An arrangement of consciousness in a specific pattern, and that pattern doesn't get deleted. It just no longer updates. It's like a still image in a photo album. You don't see it moving, but it is still real. Now think about this. When you look back at a memory, you often feel like it's gone, but your brain can reconstruct it. You can feel it again, see it again, as if that version of you is still echoing somewhere. But that's just the shadow. The truth might be far more disturbing and beautiful. What if your childhood self isn't just a memory? What if that moment of you, playing in the dirt, laughing at something no one else understood, is still there, still playing, still alive in a frame of the universe that hasn't been erased because it can't be? Moments don't die, they persist. You just stop visiting them. Because your perception moves like a spotlight across a frozen landscape. You call it life, but it's just your awareness moving from one room to another in a mansion that never changes. And death? Death is when the spotlight stops moving, but the mansion remains. Your thoughts, your voice, your fears, your last breath, they don't vanish. They become part of a structure that's eternal, and yet, we fear death as if it's annihilation, as if something is lost forever. But nothing in the universe is ever lost. Matter becomes energy. Patterns echo. Information disperses, but it doesn't disappear. Even the atoms in your body will go on to become other things: stars, dirt, organisms, air. So why should your moment be any different? Why should your conscious arrangement be the only thing in the universe that's deleted? Maybe the fear of death comes not from reality, but from believing in a timeline that was never yours. We invented clocks. We invented before and after. We created calendars, lifespans, countdowns. We taught our brains to think in beginnings and endings because it helps us make sense of change. But at a fundamental level, the universe doesn't use that language. It speaks in states, not sequences. And when you realize this, you understand that death is only tragic inside the story we've told ourselves. Outside the story, nothing ever leaves. You are not a candle being snuffed out. You are a note in a song that never stops playing. You're just not hearing the rest of the melody anymore. And maybe, just maybe, that's what happens when you die. You stop hearing this verse, but the music keeps playing, in other keys, in other arrangements, in echoes that stretch through dimensions your brain was never wired to perceive. You never stopped. You were never erased. You only stopped thinking you were moving. So the next time you fear death, when the panic creeps in, when the timeline threatens to shut its door, remember this: nothing ends. It only stops appearing to move. And when it stops moving, it doesn't disappear. It becomes eternal. You were never meant to run out of time, because time was never running at all. Reality is a default illusion. You wake up, and without thinking, call it reality. The weight of the sheets, the hum of the fan, the light breaking through the window at an angle your brain has seen 1,000 times. Familiar, predictable, real. But stop. Ask yourself, why do you believe this is truth? Not because you proved it, not because it offered credentials, but because it's what you always return to. It's what doesn't fight back. It's what feels like home. This is the illusion. That repetition equals reality. That because this world persists and feels stable, it must be true. But stability is not truth. It's only rhythm. Familiarity is not proof. It's just what you've survived long enough to stop questioning. And in that quiet, unspoken agreement, your mind gets lazy. It accepts. It stabilizes the hallucination and calls it real. This world, the one you're in right now, isn't verified. It's defaulted. It's what your senses report most consistently, so your brain settles. Not because it's correct, but because it's reliable. It doesn't confuse you. It just repeats. You don't remember choosing this reality. You were born into it, downloaded into a body, given labels for everything before you could even form a question. This is red. That is your mother. This is pain. This is Sunday. By the time you were old enough to wonder, the answers were already carved into your nervous system, so you stopped asking. But what if this isn't the world? What if this is just the most practiced version? A simulation rendered so many times that your brain got addicted to the way it feels, not because it's real, but because it's consistent. Like a song played on repeat until you know every note. Like a room you stay in so long that you forget there's a door. This addiction to familiarity runs deep. That's why déjà vu feels so powerful. Not because it confirms reality, but because it bends it. It reminds you that your perception of now is just a signal echoing through layers of previous patterns. You've been here before, not in space, but in code. And your brain lights up, not because it sees truth, but because it sees repetition. That's what it's trained to trust. And yet, we call this real. We say, I know what's true. I can touch it, see it, name it. But what you're touching is electrical feedback. What you're seeing is a sliver of the spectrum. What you're naming is a guess repeated enough times to become a law. You don't perceive reality. You perceive a version of it. Edited, translated, buffered through billions of years of nervous system evolution, designed not for truth, but for survival. Your eyes don't show you what exists. They show you what helps you function. This is not cynicism. It's structure. Your brain builds a model of the world, not to reflect it accurately, but to keep you alive. You don't see atoms. You see chairs. You don't feel time dilate under motion. You feel late for work. You don't see the electromagnetic storm around your body. You see me. And when you start to notice the cracks, those moments of awe, of trauma, of uncanny stillness, your mind rushes to patch them, because it's not truth that brings safety. It's familiarity. You call this real because you've never fully been without it. But what if the realest moments of your life were the ones where the default illusion slipped, the silence after loss, the stillness in a dream you didn't want to wake from, the way time bent on that one strange day you never forgot? In those moments, you weren't seeing less. You were seeing beneath, behind the wallpaper of assumed truth, into a rawer texture of existence, one that doesn't beg to be understood, just witnessed. So, maybe reality isn't what stays. Maybe reality is what resists being pinned down. Maybe what you're used to is just a practiced hallucination, a comfort loop of sensory patterns that your brain calls home, not because it's right, but because it's easy to render. And maybe truth isn't what feels real. Maybe truth is what shakes you out of that feeling. You are not broken for questioning this world. You are not lost for wondering what's beyond the frame. You are simply waking up from the most addictive illusion of all, that what you've always known was the same as what is. Your mind was outsourced. You think your thoughts are yours, that the ideas swirling in your head, the opinions, preferences, values, fears, were built from some private inner source. That, when you speak from self. That when you choose freely. But pause for a moment. Listen closely. Where did that voice inside your head learn its language? It didn't invent the words. It inherited them. This is the quiet truth almost no one tells you. Your mind was outsourced. From the moment you were born, before you could walk, before you had a name, your mind was being installed, not invented. You didn't build your mental framework. You absorbed it. Through words, through tone, through approval, through punishment, through repetition, and the source, other people. You are not the author, you are the receiver. You learned what to fear before you understood why. You learned what to desire before you had a chance to decide whether it made sense. You adopted definitions of success, beauty, intelligence, goodness, not because you reasoned your way to them, but because they were whispered into your mind until they felt like your own. Culture carved your mind like a riverbed, shaping your flow before you knew you were moving. Your parents told you what mattered. School told you how to think. Religion told you who you are. Society told you what you should become. And you took all of it. Not because you were weak, but because that's what minds do. They learn by osmosis, through imitation, through proximity. You are not a generator of thought. You are a sponge. And yet, you still feel like the thinker. That's the trick. The system that installed the program also convinced you that you wrote it, so you defend your beliefs as if they are sacred. You argue for ideas as if they were born inside you. You suffer over goals you never questioned, jobs, status, timelines, dreams, because they were embedded so deeply that they masquerade as truth. But ask yourself, where did that belief come from? Who benefits if you keep thinking it? What if the idea that you must always be productive isn't an inner drive, but a factory's echo? What if your insecurity isn't a flaw, but a profit model? What if your taste was shaped by algorithms, not authenticity? What if even your rebellion is a pre-approved brand of dissent? Your thoughts are not original, they're echoes. Your preferences are not chosen, they're conditioned. And your values? They were installed like apps, quietly, automatically, until they ran in the background as if they belonged there. Even memory, that sacred temple of self, is edited, rewritten, reframed. Every time you remember something, you don't retrieve a file. You reconstruct a story, colored by what you've been told, tinted by who you believe you are. So what are you then? A vessel? A relay? A network node in a larger stream of ideas? But that doesn't mean you're powerless. It means your power is not where you think it is. You don't have full control over the contents of your mind. But you can question the origin. You can slow down the reflex. You can observe the thought instead of obeying it. You can ask, again and again, who told me this? And maybe, beneath the layers of programming, you'll find something strange. Not a fixed identity, not a perfect truth, but a clearing. A quiet space where the noise recedes. And from that space, something new can arise. Not perfectly free, but less manipulated, less automatic, more aware. That's what freedom really is. Not thinking whatever you want, but realizing how little of what you think is truly yours, and choosing, moment by moment, what you allow to stay. The end happens first. You think you were born, that your life began with breath, with sound, with sensation, that everything that followed came afterward. Experiences, decisions, growth, loss, a forward journey, a clean beginning, a future unfolding step by step. But what if that's not how it works? What if your life didn't begin? What if it ended, and everything else is just the echo unraveling in reverse? This is the paradox of the end happens first. A quiet collapse of everything you believe about time, self, and origin, because maybe you weren't created and then lived. Maybe you were concluded, and what you call living is just the slow decoding of that conclusion. Think of a computer program. The final output already exists in code, lines written, logic settled. You watch the animation unfold, frame by frame, but the system knows the ending before the first pixel lights up. It's not discovering, it's rendering. It's revealing what's already been written. Now, imagine the universe like that. Not expanding into possibility, but revealing itself from completion. Not creating moments, but decoding outcomes. You are not a seed growing toward a future. You are the blossom rendered backward. You are not writing a story. You are reading one in reverse. This is more than metaphor. It touches physics. In some cosmological models, time is not linear but symmetrical. At the quantum level, particles don't care about past or future. Causes don't always precede effects. In fact, time reversal symmetry suggests the equations of the universe work just as well backwards as they do forward. So what if that's what you are? A human equation, played in reverse. Your life doesn't unfold. It compresses. It translates. It reveals. And the self you call I is not marching toward destiny, but tracing a perfect thread back through inevitability. You were always going to be exactly this. Not because you built toward it, but because it's where the story ends. And from that ending, every line, every thought, every emotion flows backward, sculpting the illusion of discovery. This is why some moments feel scripted, why some people feel like returns, why some decisions feel less like choices and more like recognitions. It's not coincidence. It's compression. You're not remembering. You're unfolding what was already packed inside the final page. Your dreams know it. Your déjà vu remembers it. Your quietest thoughts whisper it. You've been here. You are here. You were always here. You think you are becoming, but you are decoding. You are unzipping a structure that is complete, the way a flower decodes its bloom, the way music decodes silence into form, the way death decodes life. And once you see it, the illusion shatters. You stop asking, what will I become? And start wondering, what was I always meant to reveal? You stop fearing the unknown, because it's not unknown. It's unread. It's already printed. You're just moving your finger beneath each word. And then you realize something terrifying and liberating. You were never born. You arrived already complete. You're not heading toward death. You're translating death into memory. You're shaping an echo into form. That final moment, whatever it is, already exists. And from it, your story unspooled like magnetic tape in reverse. Your laughter, your grief, your questions, all preloaded, all pre-shaped, all flowing from the end, not toward it. So what do you do with this? You stop forcing the narrative. You stop treating the future like clay to be molded. You realize your task isn't to build, it's to receive, to remember what you've already been, to walk gently through a structure too vast to see, but not too quiet to feel, because the end is not waiting for you. It's behind you. It's inside you. It is you. And everything else? Just the sacred unraveling of a truth that already happened. Thought is a place, not process. You say you're sure, you say you know, that this is right, that is wrong, this person is trustworthy, that belief is truth. You speak with confidence, walk with conviction, argue as though the ground beneath your words is solid. But here's the unsettling question. When did you become sure? Not just of facts, but of anything. What if certainty isn't earned at all? What if it's not the product of evidence or clarity, but the absence of resistance? What if certainty is just repetition? Repetition so loud, so persistent, that your brain got tired of asking. That's the quiet machinery behind belief. You didn't become sure because it made perfect sense. You became sure because the doubt finally gave up. Certainty is not a signal of truth. It's a fatigue pattern, a cognitive shortcut. Your mind encounters the same idea enough times, without contradiction, and eventually stamps it as known. Not because it is known, but because the questioning process got expensive. It took too much energy to keep that door open. So the door closes, not with a slam, but with a sigh. Enough. This must be real. This is how illusions stick. This is how ideologies root. This is how we start saying, I believe, when what we really mean is, I stopped doubting. You feel the shift internally. You read a headline, once, twice, 10 times. You hear a phrase, they always lie. The system is broken. This is the only way. And eventually, it feels familiar. And the brain equates familiarity with truth. Repetition becomes credibility, even without proof. Especially without proof. Psychologists call this the illusory truth effect. The more often you hear a statement, even if it's false, the more likely you are to believe it's true, just because it echoes, just because it repeats, just because your brain wants rest. That's the lie of certainty. It masquerades as strength, but it's built on exhaustion. This happens at every level. In relationships, in politics, in religion, in self-image. You tell yourself a story. I'm not good enough. People always leave. This is who I am. At first, there's a flicker of doubt, a chance to challenge it. But you say it again and again and again, until it becomes your certainty. Not because it's accurate, but because it's settled. Truth at its rawest is unstable. It shifts when you look too hard. It resists absolute form. It evolves. But the mind hates that. It craves stillness. It wants a foundation. So it invents certainty, a stillness we pretend was always there. And here's where it gets darker. Certainty becomes identity. The more you cling to what you know, the more you build yourself around it. And then questioning that belief doesn't just feel like uncertainty, it feels like dying, like losing a piece of yourself. So you defend it, not to protect truth, but to protect the self built around that truth. That's why facts rarely change minds, because truth isn't the issue, certainty is. And certainty doesn't care about facts, it cares about familiarity. It cares about loyalty. It rewards what repeats, what soothes, what stops the noise. You've seen it happen. A person clings to a clearly false claim. They double down even when shown evidence, not because they're stupid, but because their brain has fused certainty to safety. Their nervous system reads, you might be wrong, as you might be destroyed. So they retreat into the illusion, because the illusion feels more stable than the truth. But here's the paradox. Every real truth was once uncertainty. Every insight, every breakthrough, every awakening began as doubt, as discomfort, as someone saying, wait, is this really true? And that moment, the trembling before new understanding, is the birthplace of wisdom. So the goal is not to eliminate doubt, it's to honor it, because doubt is not weakness, it's the immune system of the mind. It protects you from infection by assumption. It keeps your beliefs alive by keeping them vulnerable. When you find yourself certain, ask, when did I stop questioning this? Was it earned, or just repeated until it settled? Do I believe this because it's true, or because I'm tired? And if the answer makes you uncomfortable, good. That's the sound of the mind waking up again, because truth doesn't demand your loyalty. Only illusions do. Truth can't handle being doubted. Illusions collapse under it. So, if certainty is an invention, a resting point, not a destination, then maybe real strength is not in standing firm, but in staying flexible. Not in saying, I know, but in whispering, I'm still learning. The world is complex. Reality bends. And the only minds that survive aren't the ones who cling to certainty, but the ones brave enough to live without it. Not lost, but open. You don't think, you enter. Thought isn't a process that unfolds in time. It's a location your mind steps into, a structure, a room, a terrain with boundaries and gravity and pathways. You don't build thoughts from scratch. You arrive inside them. And once you're there, you explore. You move around. You take the same routes you've always taken. You confuse that motion for thinking. But it's not. It's navigation. Every time you say, I'm thinking about this, what you really mean is, I've entered a familiar space in my mind, a space shaped by past experience, belief, fear, memory, identity. That space isn't new. You've been there before, and you'll go there again. Because most people live their entire lives inside the same few mental rooms. They don't think. They pace. This is why breakthroughs feel like arrivals, not creations. You don't invent new thoughts. You stumble into new mental terrain. You fall into a space you didn't know existed. You don't say, I made a new thought. You say, I just realized something. Like you found it waiting for you, because you did. Thought is not linear, it's spatial. Your beliefs are furniture. Your fears are locked doors. Your memories are paintings on the walls. Sometimes distorted, sometimes sacred. And your identity? That's the echo in the room. The voice that says, this is mine, this is me. But what if it's not? What if your thoughts aren't yours, but places you inherited? Rooms you were handed? Blueprints installed before you ever had a choice? You enter them so often that they feel like home. But they were built by others. Parents, media, trauma, culture. And every time you step into them, you reinforce the architecture. You forget you could leave. You forget there's more. This is why change feels like dying. Because to change your mind isn't just to alter a belief. It's to abandon a location. To leave a mental world you've lived inside for years. To step into a different geometry. And the old place doesn't want you to leave. It pulls you back. It whispers, that new room is unfamiliar. It's dangerous. Stay here. At least here, you know the exits. But transformation requires exile. You must walk out of the familiar. You must question the floor beneath your thoughts. You must ask, whose house am I in? Who built these rooms? Why are the windows boarded shut? You must risk stepping into empty spaces. Unknown thought places with no labels, no maps. And in those places, you won't know who you are. That's the price of expansion. But that's also the birth of real thought. Because when you stop pacing old paths, you start wandering. You stop rehearsing answers and start asking real questions. You stop echoing and start hearing. Thought was never a mechanical process. It was never a straight line. It was always a dimension, a territory. And most people are trapped inside one corner of it, forever mistaking movement for discovery. But you don't have to be. You can tear down walls, collapse rooms, build staircases to levels you were told don't exist. You can stop thinking what you're supposed to think and begin to see thought itself as a landscape, vast, infinite, unmapped. And once you do, you don't just think differently. You live somewhere else. Character count, without spaces, approximately 5,450. Character count, with spaces, approximately 6,530 designed for a 5-6 minute voiceover. Let me know if you'd like surreal visual prompt sets, a matching companion piece, or a thumbnail concept based on this metaphysical idea.